The Singularity by Dino Buzzati, translated by Anne Milano Apple. Chapter 1. In April 1972, Ermanno Ismani, a 43-year-old university professor of electronics, received a letter from the Ministry of Defense requesting that he meet with a Colonel Giacinto, the head of the Research and Development Division. To Ismani, a short, stout man with a cheerful but rather timorous disposition, the request appeared to be urgent. Unable to even remotely imagine what it might be about, Ismani, who had always had an inferiority complex with respect to figures of authority, hurried to the ministry that very same day. He had never been there before. With his usual ineptitude, he arrived in the waiting room unannounced. At once, a uniformed orderly appeared and asked the nature of his visit. Ismani showed him the letter. As if by magic, after glancing at the paper, the guard became a changed man. Having at first addressed him somewhat brusquely, shabbily dressed, his manner a bit awkward, Ismani seemed like someone to be underrated. Apologizing, the guard asked Ismani to wait a moment and hurried into a nearby room. A second lieutenant came out, asking to see the letter. After reading it with a vaguely embarrassed smile, he then, with conspicuous deference, asked Ismani to follow him. "What is it about this letter that's so odd?" Ismani wondered. Quite intrigued. Why, after reading it, do they treat me as if I were a big shot? To him it had seemed like any ordinary official communication. The same slightly apprehensive regard was displayed by other officers, of gradually increasing rank, in the successive offices through which Ismani was led. He even had the unpleasant impression that each of those officers, as soon as he saw the letter, had been quick to pass the matter on to others, men of higher authority, as if he, Ismani, though someone to be treated with all due respect, were rather problematic, if not downright risky. Colonel Giacinto must have possessed extraordinary authority, much greater than his rank would lead one to presume. So numerous were the barriers that Ismani had to pass through to reach him. Giacinto, a man in his 50s dressed in civilian clothes, welcomed him deferentially. There'd been no need, he said, for Ismani to have rushed over. The urgency alluded to in the letter was merely a formality, standard for nearly all the practices of his office. "Not to take up any more of your time than necessary, Professor, I'll explain immediately, or rather," and here he gave an elusive little chuckle, "rather, I will present the terms of the matter that the ministry intends to propose to you. What it's really about, I myself don't know. In certain sectors, you, Professor, will understand, exercising due diligence is never excessive. In fact, in that regard, I will point out that anyone else would have been asked for a precautionary pledge to honor the most exacting secrecy. But in your case, Professor, your personal renown, your titles, your past military experience, your prestige." What is he getting at? Ismani wondered with a growing feeling of uneasiness. "Excuse me, Colonel," he said. "I really don't understand." The colonel looked at him, vaguely ironic, then stood up from his desk. Taking a set of keys from his pocket, he opened a massive metal file cabinet, pulled out a folder, and went back to the desk. "Here we are," he said, consulting the typewritten pages. "Are you, Professor Ismani, willing to render a service to your country?" "Me? How?" The suspicion that there was some gross misunderstanding seemed more and more likely. "We did not doubt it, Professor," said Giacinto. "Your sentiments are no mystery to those in high places. That's exactly why we are relying on you." "But I don't see what—" "Would you be willing, Professor," the colonel asked in a different tone, enunciating the words clearly, "would you be willing to relocate to one of our military zones for a minimum of 2 years to participate in a mission of vital national interest, as well as extraordinary scientific value? As far as your position at the university goes, you would ostensibly be on official assignment with full salary, that goes without saying, plus a substantial emolument for the mission itself. I am not able to specify the exact sum, but it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 22,000 liras per day." "Per day?" Ismani exclaimed, dumbfounded. "Plus spacious, comfortable accommodations, equipped with all the modern conveniences. The location, I read here, is extremely salubrious and delightful. Cigarette? Thank you, I don't smoke. But what does the work involve?" "The ministry's nomination itself, it seems to me, implies that your specific skills were taken into account. Once the mission has been carried out, of course, the government will not fail to substantially show its, also taking into account the undeniable sacrifice of residing—" "Why, wouldn't I be able to leave there?" "The very importance of the task. For 2 years. And the university? What about my classes?" "I can assure you, although I, as I've said, am uninformed as to the nature of the project, that you will be given the opportunity to do some exceedingly interesting research. Though, to be honest, I must add that there has never been any doubt here as to what your answer would be." "And with whom?" I'm not able to answer that. However, I can mention a name, a great name, Andriade. Andriade? But he's in Brazil right now. Yes, of course, in Brazil, officially. The colonel winked. Now, Professor, there's absolutely no reason to be upset. You're a little anxious, perhaps, am I right? Me? I don't know. Well, who isn't anxious given the frantic life we lead today? In this case, I assure you, such feelings would be totally out of place. The proposal, it's my duty to stress, is meant to be flattering. Then, too, there's no rush. Go home, Professor, he said with a smile. Go on with your usual life as if I hadn't told you a thing. Understand? As if you had never set foot in this office. Think about it, though. Think about it. Should you want, give me a call. What about my wife? You know, Colonel, you may laugh, but we've only been married a short time, less than 2 years. Congratulations, Professor, the colonel said, wrinkling his brow as if considering a difficult problem. However, it doesn't necessarily mean, if you would personally vouch for her. Oh, my wife is such a simple creature, so naive, there's no danger that... Besides, she has never been interested in my research. All the better that way, I think, and the colonel laughed. Colonel, before... What is it? Tell me. Before deciding one way or another, wouldn't it be possible for me to... Know more about it, you mean? Well, yes, being asked to drop everything for 2 years without even knowing what... Indeed, Professor, on that point, you will have to be patient. I can give you my word that I know nothing more than what I have told you. That's not all. You may not want to believe this, but as regards the precise task that will be assigned to you, I'm afraid there isn't a single individual in the entire ministry, not one, understand, who is capable of telling you what it is. It seems ludicrous, I know. Not even the chief of staff, perhaps. At times, the military's top-secret machinery rises to the level of absurdity. Our job is to protect the secret. What's concealed inside it, however, is none of our concern. But you will have time to find out all about it, all the time you want, in 2 years, I'd say. Excuse me, then how did you happen to choose me, for example? Us? It certainly wasn't us. The suggestion came from the zone itself. From Andriade? Don't put words in my mouth, Professor. It may have been Andriade, but I don't know for certain. No, Professor, there's no hurry. Go back to your classes as if I hadn't said a word to you, and thank you for coming. I don't want to take up any more of your time. The colonel stood to accompany Ismani to the door. There's absolutely no rush, but think about it, Professor. And should you decide... Chapter 2. The proposal from the ministry plunged Professor Ismani into an abyss of trepidation. Had he obeyed his instinct, which inclined him only to peace and quiet, to the preservation of res extantes, to the regime of an unruffled sedentary life, he would have answered no immediately. But that same timidity led him to accept. A decent man, if ever there was one, though the idea of being sent off to a mysterious destination for 2 years, on an assignment that perhaps might not suit him, under the onerous constraint of secrecy, among people he didn't know, since he had seen Andriade, a luminary in physics, only a couple of times in chaotic conference settings. Though the idea struck him with feelings close to terror, it was even more difficult for him to shirk what had been presented to him as his duty, as a citizen and as a scientist. In the war he had been brave, but not because of a natural disregard for fear. On the contrary, it had always been the fear of appearing cowardly, of failing to carry out an order, of not deserving the trust the soldiers placed in him, of being unworthy of his rank, that made him overcome with unspeakable anxiety the other fear, the physical one, of enemy fire, of being wounded, of death. Now he found himself in the same situation. He rushed home to tell his wife Elisa, who, though 15 years younger than he, was far more mature and tougher in dealing with life's problems. Elisa was a petite woman, rather plump but sturdy. Her broad, round face conveyed a placid, soothing decisiveness under any circumstance. Wherever she happened to be, even in the most hospitable, inopportune places, she gave the appearance of being perfectly at home after just a few minutes. Wherever she went, anxiety, filth, disorder, discomfort disappeared immediately and inexplicably. As a wife, she was an incalculable blessing for Ismani, who was so unprepared for practical life and concerned about every trifling detail. As often happens, the contrast between the two temperaments was most likely the uppermost reason for the great love they had for each other, and a contributing factor that made their union a happy one was certainly the fact that Elisa had not gone beyond middle school and did not have the faintest idea about her husband's studies. Though she considered him a genius, she took no interest in his work except to prevent him from staying up too late at night. He barely had time to walk through the door before she came to greet him, in an apron with a spoon in her hand, and pointed a finger at him. "Don't say anything. I already know. They offered you a new job." "And how did you find out?" "Oh, my dear man, one look at you is all it takes. You look like Napoleon leaving for St. Helena." "Who told you?" "What?" "About St. Helena." "You have to go to St. Helena?" she asked, as her smile faded. "A kind of St. Helena, actually, but don't mention it to anyone. If word got out, I could get in trouble." He turned abruptly and hastily threw open the door that had closed behind him, then went to the stairs and looked down. "What are you doing?" "I thought I heard footsteps." "So? I wouldn't want anyone to be out there listening." "Now you're scaring me, Hermano." "So it's really serious business." She laughed cheerfully. "Come inside, come into the kitchen and tell me. No one will hear us in here, I promise." With some difficulty, because there was great confusion swirling in his head, Ismani told her about his talk with Giacinto. "And you accepted, didn't you?" "Why?" "Oh, my dear man, of course you'll accept." "Because of what they'll pay me, you mean?" He was disappointed because he always considered himself to be above the vulgarity of money. "Of course not for the money. Duty, the obligation, love of country. Oh, they knew how to approach you just right. The way they knew it. Not that I blame you, you know." She burst into laughter and added, "With more than 600,000 liras per month, not to mention salary." "You've already tallied it up, have you?" he said, feeling reassured for some reason. "And when would you ever dream of such a salary? I can already see those colleagues of yours, their faces green with envy. But what is it? An atomic plant?" "They didn't tell me anything." "If there's so much secrecy, it must be an atomic bomb. But do you know anything about those things? I wouldn't think it was your field." "I don't know a thing, nothing." Elisa became thoughtful. "Right. You're certainly not a physicist. If they chose you..." "That wouldn't mean anything. Even an atomic plant, especially during the planning phase, they might very well need someone like me who specializes in..." "An atomic plant, then. When?" "When what?" "When do you go?" "I don't know anything about it. I didn't accept." "But you will accept, of course. You will accept. There's only one thing that would make you say no, maybe." "What's that?" "If you had to go alone. If I couldn't go with you, maybe." And then she smiled. "It seems it's also a very nice place," Ismani said. Chapter 3. Ismani and his wife left for Military Zone 36 in early June in a car belonging to the Ministry of Defense. A soldier was driving it. They were accompanied by Captain Vestro, a staff officer, about 35 years old, stocky with small beady eyes and an ironic look. At the time of departure, the Ismanis knew they were headed for Val Texteruda, a well-known vacation area, where Elisa had also vacationed as a girl many years before. But they didn't know any more than that. Rising to the north of Val Texteruda was an extensive range of mountains. Maybe the destination was up there, in some remote spot hidden away among the rock faces, or in the woods, or in an alpine village cleared of its inhabitants and transformed into a military base. "Captain," Mrs. Mani asked, "where exactly are you taking us?" Vestro spoke slowly, as if searching for his words one by one, perhaps out of prudence, almost as if he were afraid of letting some restricted information leak. "Here, ma'am," he replied, showing her a typewritten sheet of paper, though not handing it over to her. "This is the appointed itinerary. Tonight you will stop at Serra. Tomorrow morning departure at 8:30. The state highway as far as St. Agostino. From that point, there's a military road. I will have the pleasure and the honor of accompanying you to the checkpoint. There my charge will end. Another car will come to pick you up." "But you, Captain, have you ever been there?" "Where?" "Military Zone 36. "No, ma'am, I've never been there." "What is it, an atomic plant?" "An atomic plant," the officer mused in a vague tone. "That will be interesting for the professor, I imagine." "But I was asking you, Captain." "Me? I don't know anything about it." "You will admit, then, that it's quite curious. You know nothing, my husband knows nothing, at the ministry they know nothing. In fact, at the ministry they were extremely reticent, weren't they, Hermano?" "Reticent? Why do you say that?" Hermano said. "They were very courteous." Vestro smiled faintly. "So you see I was right," Elisa asked. "Right about what, sweetheart?" "That they called you for the atomic bomb." "But the captain didn't say that." "Well then," the woman insisted, "what do they do in this military Zone 36 if it's not the atom bomb?" "Careful, Mora," the captain exclaimed, not weighing his words this time, since they were passing a huge truck and the road was rather narrow. Though actually, there seemed to be no reason to be alarmed. It was a long, straight stretch, and no one was approaching from the other direction. As I was saying, Elisa Ismani went on, I said that if it's not the atom bomb, what do they do in this place we're going to? And why won't they tell us? Even if it were a military secret, it seems to me, rather than going there in person. You referred to an atomic plant? Not referred to, I was only asking. Well, ma'am, Captain Vestro said, his answer strained, I think you will have to be patient until you get there. I assure you that I am not in a position to tell you. But you know, don't you? I told you, ma'am. I have never been there. But you know what it is they do there, don't you? Ismani listened nervously. Look, ma'am, and forgive me for being pedantic. There are 3 possibilities. Either it isn't a secret, but I don't know what it is. Or I know, but it's a secret. Or it's a secret, and on top of that, I don't know what it is. You see that in any case. But, Elisa objected, you could tell us which of the 3 cases it is. The second, the officer countered, depending on the level of secrecy. If it were classified top secret, as is often the case in operational plans, for example, it would even extend, and the rule expressly prescribes it, to everything that concerns it, even remotely and partially, even indirectly and negatively. And what does negatively mean? It means that if someone knows that there is such a secret, but doesn't know what it is, he is even forbidden to reveal that he doesn't know it. And note, ma'am, that though the restriction is seemingly absurd, it has its good reasons. Take our case, for instance, Military Zone 36. Well, then simply admitting that I am not informed, given my rank and functions, might provide a clue, albeit minimal, to someone who... But you know who we are, Mrs. Monty exclaimed, irritably. The fact that you are taking us there excludes, I would say, any possibility of suspicion. Ma'am, at the center to the military academy. I imagine you've never been there. There is an inscription in the vestibule. Secrets have neither family nor friends. This can be harsh, in certain situations, difficult and objectionable to those close to you, I admit, he trailed off. He seemed exhausted by the long explanation. Mrs. Monty laughed. So you are diplomatically telling me that you can't or won't tell us what's at this celebrated military zone? But ma'am, the captain exclaimed with his didactic imperturbability, I never said I knew. All right, enough. I was a bit petulant. I'm sorry. The officer was silent. About 5 minutes went by, then Ismani timidly spoke up. Forgive me, Captain. You said there were 3 possibilities. Actually, there are 4, because it might also be the matter that it is not secret, and that you know what it is. I didn't propose that case, Vestro explained, because it seems superfluous. Superfluous? That's right. In that case, if that were the case, I would have told you everything a long time ago. Watch it, Mora. But the warning to the driver was also superfluous. The curve they were approaching was very gentle, and the car wasn't doing more than 35. Chapter 4. The following day they drove to Valtexteruda. The road was fine as far as Serra de Oltro, a vacation resort bounded by forests. Then it narrowed and became difficult, with tight hairpin switchbacks. The surroundings also became more and more desolate, the houses increasingly sparse, the wood denser, encounters rare, and beyond the valleys on either side of the road the profiles of craggy, tilted mountains would occasionally be seen, all leaning the same way, like certain trees, especially on the banks of rivers where the wind blows in only one direction. None of the 3 spoke. The sky high above was uniformly gray. Lower down, masses of clouds circled the crests, drifting into the deep gullies. Is it much further? Ismani asked every so often. I don't think so, Vester replied, but it's the first time for me too. But how many more miles? Oh, not many, just a few. At one point they came to a crossroad. A road off to the right dipped abruptly into a menacing ravine so precipitous that it wasn't clear how it would continue. For a fraction of a second, in an opening between the steep walls of rock with their shrunken, twisted fir trees, God knows how they managed to grow on tiny ledges of the overhanging rock faces, Ismani glimpsed a bastion of white rocks, with rounded summits, vaguely reminiscent of skulls. All in all, the setting gave him a feeling of uneasiness. If that's my destination, he thought, I won't stay, no matter what. And right after that, what do you want to bet that we'll turn right now into the gully? Instead, the car continued straight on. After half an hour or so, the valley widened a little, allowing more light, and even the mountains on either side seemed less somber. When they stopped at a service station for gas, they got out to stretch their legs and have some coffee. Ismani, taking advantage of the fact that the captain was standing somewhat apart, pointed to a road zigzagging up the side of the valley and asked the kind-looking elderly man at the rest stop, "Does that go up to the atomic plant?" "Atomic?" the man asked, glancing around as if looking for help. I'm not familiar with that." "You must have heard of it, haven't you?" Meanwhile, Vestro had approached. "Oh, maybe. You hear a lot of things. Of course, the weather. Well, the weather." "What about the weather?" "The weather is no longer what it used to be. Always pleasant now. It doesn't rain anymore." And he laughed. Though extremely vague, as well as to be expected from the natural distrust of those valley dwellers cut off from the world, it could be considered a confirmation. But could Ismani believe him? Perhaps it was a false impression due to his overwrought imagination, but as the man casually turned his head, Ismani seemed to catch a slight twinkle in his eye, a kind of elusive wink meant for the captain, who, however, did not turn a hair. Back in the car, Captain Vestro murmured something to the driver that Ismani could not make out. Instead of continuing up the valley, the car turned around. "Are we going back?" Mrs. Monty asked. Vestro replied slowly, "You have to excuse me. I'm not familiar with the roads. We passed the turnoff, and I didn't realize it." "What turnoff?" Ismani asked, apprehensive, thinking about the gully that had made such a dreadful impression on him. "It should be about 2 or 3 miles back. We were supposed to come to the lateral valley. No one smoke." "That's the one," Ismani thought. "I knew as soon as I saw it. I sensed it. But I'm not staying up there, that's for sure." "Listen, Captain," he said after a few minutes, trying to appear as calm as could be. "Forgive my curiosity. If I—" "Tell me, Professor," the captain urged him, given that Ismani was hesitating. I'm just saying, speaking purely hypothetically, what if I wanted to back out now? I mean, if I were to change my mind?" "In that case," Vestro spelled out with his usual composure, "I'm at your service to take you back home." "Why? Was that possibility anticipated?" "I don't know. I was given orders. Even in the event that you, Professor—" "What's gotten into you, hermano?" his wife asked, smiling. "What were you thinking?" Ismano paid no attention to her. The captain's response was extremely worrisome. "So it was not ruled out," he said, "that at the last moment—" "It's normal in these cases, Professor, to consider every possibility, and the ministry, it is, I believe, a voluntary mission. Any coercion would be contrary to—" "Tell me the truth, Captain. Was there someone before me who pulled out?" I don't know. I don't think so. I've never heard of anyone. Again, this is the first time I've come to this area." Ismani was silent, wavering over a decision. His refusal after coming up there would seem peculiar and ridiculous, what you'd expect from a child. But the memory of that menacing ravine, with those death-like cliffs in the distance, provoked an actual physical revulsion. Nonetheless, he chose to wait and see. As he'd expected, the car slowed down just at the gully on the left. "Is that where we're going?" Ismani asked. "Oh, no," Vestro replied. "Exactly the opposite way," he said, pointing to the other side. Ismani and his wife turned their heads to the right. A bridge at right angles to the main road crossed the stream, or rather, the wide bed of white pebbles, given that there was only a trickle of water, leading to the mouth of a side valley. Compared to the yawning ravine opposite, this valley was broad, full of greenery, cheerful. Woods and meadows stretched out in an irregular succession of steep slopes, and beyond this romantic setting, a precipitous mountain range could be glimpsed. But whether it was due to the different aspect of the peaks, or to the brighter light smiling down from the sky that had meanwhile cleared to reveal large patches of blue, this time Ismani did not have a negative impression. Chapter 5. At the very end of the last stretch of the rocky ascent, beyond which the terrain suggested a plateau, the road came to a clearing. This was the location of the checkpoint, a small barracks-like building, a flagpole, a rustic wooden railing all around, 2 benches, a table, and an apparently abandoned doghouse. The setting was quite beautiful. Woods all around, plunging down steep slopes toward Val Textruda, whose valley floor could be seen far below. Viewed from a distance, the white bed of a stream, the road, the villages scattered here and there, the tenuous mist, conveyed the sense of a quiet, pure, unhurried life that mountain places inspire. Only behind them was the view obstructed. In fact, the forest was broken by an irregular barrier of gray slabs, invaded by weeds and brushwood, beyond which nothing was visible. Despite the vastness of the panorama, this looming wall in some way constrained the sight and gave it a melancholy air. The Ismanis were greeted by the duty officer. a Lieutenant Trodsdom, who, having been informed of their arrival beforehand, had had breakfast prepared and proved to be most kind. In effect, the Ismanis would have to wait a little while to continue their journey. From that point on, the area was a restricted military zone, which Captain Vestra's car was not authorized to enter. Another car would come down for them from the center, which was Ismani's destination. Or rather, the lieutenant explained, the car had already come down, but they had to await the arrival of another guest of the center, the wife of the engineer, Strobel, with whom the Ismanis would make the last part of the journey. Who was this Strobel? From the lieutenant's vague explanations, Ismani understood that he must be one of the big shots up there. Evidently, the arrival of his wife had deliberately been made to coincide with the Ismani's trip, not to save gasoline with a single transport, but in an effort to minimize the number of passages through the highly guarded perimeter of the military zone. Entering the barracks, the Ismanis were led to the small room that served as a mess hall. Other soldiers were there, Second Lieutenant Pico, Sergeant Major Ambrosini, and Sergeant Major Introzi. Captain Vestra left immediately. He said he had to get back down as soon as possible for duty obligations, but it was clear that he couldn't wait to get away from there. Once Vestra had gone, Ismani had the feeling that his last link with normal life had been severed. The venture had now begun, and the talk he heard steadily increased his uneasiness. Meanwhile, he realized that Lieutenant Trodsdom, Pico, and the others had no accurate idea of what was up there on the plateau. The small military garrison's charge was to keep watch, in connection with various other checkpoints stationed around Military Zone 36. It was an external cordon whose purpose was to prevent strangers from entering and to guard the surrounding territory. The officers and soldiers were not part of the center and were not allowed to enter the zone, not being among the group of elites. They were there, those soldiers, to guard a secret. But what that secret was, they didn't know. An atomic plant? For Pete's sake, don't ask me, Professor, Lieutenant Trodsdom said. If you don't know, I've been stationed here for 5 months, and I know as much as I did before. What devilish tricks can they be up to? It's secret. Here, everything is secret. For us, it's an obsession. Everyone naturally fabricates his own theories. You hear the craziest talk. All in all, you know what I say? Lucky you. You'll be up there in a couple hours, and you'll find out. You're thinking, whatever it is, it's basically no concern of yours. They're only asking you to keep an eye on things. It's true. This has nothing to do with us. Still, being associated with it, you might say, and not knowing anything about it, never anything, sometimes gets on your nerves. See those cliffs? All you'd have to do is jump up there, an elevation of a little over 100 yards. It wouldn't be difficult. From up there, you'd see, but it's prohibited, and we're military. Curiosity would be too costly. Here he smiled oddly. And yet, with all this, I have about 40 soldiers under my command, and there isn't the slightest diversion here. Complete isolation, no women, and then military secrecy on top of it. So many mysteries. If they at least told us what it is we're guarding, I mean, let's call it what it is, a kind of prison. And yet you know that no one would want to leave. Bored to death, every day, the same, never a woman's face. You, ma'am, he said, turning to Elisa Ismani. You, for instance, seem to me like, I can't even tell you what you seem like, a creature that came down from the moon. And yet, we like it here. Always cheerful, with hearty appetites. Can you explain that to me? You see, ma'am, I'm an ignorant man. But I'll tell you something, ma'am. If it's about the atomic bomb, it's a very strange plant. Strange? If what's going on here isn't strange, well, why do you say that? Ismani asked nervously. But you, Lieutenant, his wife spoke up, realizing that her husband was becoming uneasy. You, Lieutenant, aren't you held to military secrecy? How come you can speak so freely? How do you know, for example, that we two aren't spies? Trodsdom laughed. Oh, we're outside, thankfully. The secrecy begins right behind this building. In here, we're at liberty. That's all we'd need. We know absolutely nothing. We can certainly talk about that nothing, at least. Elisa Ismani gave up hoping that he would stop talking. Once he got started, the lieutenant wouldn't shut up. Clearly, he couldn't believe that he was now able to give vent to everything he'd kept inside for months. A rather jumbled account, and on the whole quite far-fetched. Chapter 6. Operations at the center, Lieutenant Trodsdom recounted, had begun about a decade ago. Since access to the zone had been closed off, hundreds, perhaps thousands of technicians and laborers had been transported to the plateau and housed in barracks. There had been a great deal of excavation and clearing, At the beginning, everyone thought that a hydroelectric dam would be built. In fact, a dam with a related power station was built, but at the same time, the walls of an installation had been erected, so they said. Better yet, several installations. Secrecy was very tight. The workers all came from military factories and arsenals with a minimum of 5 years of service. Moreover, the various plants were completely separate. Each unit functioned on its own and knew nothing about the others, so no one could form an idea of the overall master plan. After 8 years of operations, most of the workforce had been demobilized. Just a few dozen had been left up there, maybe less. Evidently, if it was a factory, a nuclear plant, for example, everything had to be automated. Just a few men were needed. But was it a factory? It seemed to Trodston that huge amounts of electrical equipment had been brought up there, but what kind he didn't know. The relative quiet that followed suggested that the plant had been finished for some time, or at least that the major works had been completed. But had it started operating? It was doubtful. Very few trucks went up and down, a fairly eloquent sign that there was no production, or almost nothing, unless the raw materials were available on site and the products were stored in situ. Another possibility was that the plant, whatever it was not intended for production of any kind, but for a different activity, which it was difficult to imagine. Trodston had often had occasion to approach workers who, for various reasons, went up to the plateau or came down, but had gotten little or nothing from them. For one thing, they were all well drilled and did not open up. But even the few who did not take the obligation of secrecy too seriously showed that they did not have very clear ideas. The only noteworthy things he had managed to learn was that except for those in command and a handful of chief engineers, none of the workers had stayed on the project from beginning to end. After a couple of years at most of being stationed up there, they were all replaced, so no one could have an accurate idea of what had been done. Much more interesting, though inexplicable according to Lieutenant Trodston, were other rumors and incidents involving the guard garrison at the outer limits of Military Zone 36. Interesting mainly because he could attest to them as a direct witness. Among other things, he told them, the soldiers stationed at the external garrison were strictly forbidden to enter the perimeter of the military zone, which was enclosed by barbed wire fencing, even on the side with the cliffs. They were obliged, however, to immediately report any suspicious sightings or incidents of any importance to the center's command, by a portable radio or by telephone. In recent times, orders from above to intensify surveillance had actually become an obsession, as if they had reason to fear some hostile attack from the outside. But the strange thing was this. Whenever the patrols or posted sentinels made a sighting, it would almost always be woodcutters or hunters, and reported it by radio as well as by three-horn blasts. They were invariably preceded, though by just a few seconds, by a similar signal from command. For example, an alert order would be issued for Grid Square 78, right orographic, Sprea River Gorge. The entire topographical map of the zone had been divided into numbered squares, and it was the exact location where the soldiers had just then spotted a stranger. In some cases, the warning was even more explicit. 2 strangers in Square X skirting the cliffs, be on alert, and sometimes the sentries had not yet noticed anything. So Trodston wondered, what does that mean? Is there someone, unseen by us, who is keeping an eye on us and performing the same surveillance as we are, indeed surpassing us in timeliness and precision? But who? And from where? They, the patrols, had never spotted anyone in the area, nor had any of the center's men ever been seen deployed on the edge of the overhanging cliffs. Or were those in command admittedly magicians? But you, Lieutenant, Ismani asked, have you ever seen the installations up there? Never. I told you that we at the garrison are prohibited from entering the zone. Around here, all there is to see are woods and rock faces. Only from Angel's Gorge, about half a mile from here, can you see anything. What? Who knows, something like a section of wall, smooth with no openings or windows, and behind the wall you can make out an antenna, very tall, sort of like a radio transmitter, and on top of it, a kind of globe. A sphere? More or less. Some say they've seen it move. Move how? Revolve. And what is it for? Don't ask me. A mystery. Everything here is a goddamn mystery. And who knows why. Maybe for some idiotic reason. You don't think there's a nuclear plant? I've already told you. For what it's worth, from an ignorant guy like me, I think that if it were a military plant, you would see a lot more equipment come by. And then, too... Is this road the only access? Ismani asked. For materials, there's also a cable line, but we can see whether it's loaded or not when it passes, Lieutenant Pico chimed in from the next table, where he was sitting alone and had been following their conversation. Go on, tell him about the voice. Trodston shrugged. Don't mind him, Professor. I don't believe that. In my opinion, it's a fairy tale. Many of the soldiers here say they hear a voice, and that it doesn't sound like a human voice. Does it come from up there? Yeah. And what does it say? Oh, they can't make it out. Some argue that it's a foreign language so you can't understand it. Others say it's too far away. I've never heard it. Ismani turned to Lieutenant Pico. And you? I think so, sometimes, but honestly I couldn't swear to it. You see, Trodstam said, when you want to get down to brass tacks, you get nowhere. Everyone knows about it, everyone swears it's true, but no one ever says, I heard it on such and such day at such and such an hour. Fantasy, nothing but fantasy, and for that matter, it's no wonder. Wherever there's a big secret, the most absurd rumors are always started, like during a war. So why don't you tell him about the dogs then? Lieutenant Pico shot back. That, at least, you too saw. Dogs? Yeah, another of the many unexplained phenomena, Trodstam admitted. About the dogs you have here? That we had. 2 wolfhounds, but we couldn't keep them. From the moment they arrived, they got all worked up. You mean barking? They didn't bark at all, no. That's what's curious. Instead, they wailed. They were itching to go up there. Up there where? God only knows where. Up on the cliffs over there. Well, so we had to send them back. But only those dogs or others as well? It seems to be the norm here. Even a Pomeranian that Sergeant Introsi brought here one day. It too immediately started yelping towards the cliffs. It almost went into convulsions. At that very moment, the sound of a car making its way up the last ascent was heard. They looked outside. The car with Miss Strobel was arriving. Chapter 7. Olga Strobel brought merriment and sparkle. She was 28 years old, a slender redhead with almond-shaped eyes, pale skin sprinkled with freckles, a slim waist, and sturdy, dependable legs. Her pouty lips seemed to be offering both a proposal and a taunt. Audacious, cheerful, and provocative, she was a beautiful woman of character, the kind of woman who turned heads along the street. As soon as she saw Ismani, she said, Did you at one time, I'm talking about 11 years ago, did you teach at the Tomaseo? Yes, but how did you know? I taught algebra at that high school for 4 years. Oh, you rascal. Look at me. Doesn't my face tell you anything? Well, yes, I think. I'm so bad with faces. And then you women from one year to the next. Olga Cotini, remember? X equals 2 times the square root of... you flunked me and you don't even remember. You'll see. I'll get even. If I had known, if I could have predicted, Ismani stammered foolishly, his face flushed with confusion. Here, let's make up. I forgive you. And so saying, she hugged him and kissed him on both cheeks. Then she turned to Mrs. Monty. You must forgive me, you know. John Carlo always says I'm uncivilized. But you have to admit, running into the professor who failed me, and meeting him up here. Besides, oh, how I hated him, your husband, and the number of times I cursed him. Let me tell you, Professor, you were a bit of an ogre in your exams, you know. With me, then, I'll get even with you for sure. Elisa Ismani did not stand on ceremony. Indeed, she was glad that such a gay, exuberant woman would be coming up there with them. For her husband, it would be an infusion of optimism. Jealousy didn't even occur to her, though she could see that men must find Olga Strobel extremely attractive. So sure was she of her hermano. Have you and Professor Strobel been married long? She asked Olga. Almost 3 months. And you live up there? No, this will be my first time visiting. So far, few satisfactions as a wife, you know. The wedding, a honeymoon, 10 days. Then Vademecum left me a widow. Vademecum? Don't mind me. I like to joke. Vademecum because of his mania to always explain everything. In short, after 10 days, he dumped me. Urgent work. Top secret. He's been working up there at the center for at least 10 years. It still wasn't enough for him. End of story. But now you're going to join him? I'll stay up there 20 days. A month at most. Then we'll come back together. His work is nearly finished now, he told me. What work? Ismani ventured. Who knows? I really couldn't tell you. What an impressive plant it must be. What plant? The one up there, I mean. Why, haven't you been there, Professor? Olga looked at him, tilting her head a little like someone who senses a trick. You're telling me you've never been there? Never. Anxious to know, Ismani would have liked to persist, but he knew he shouldn't ask indiscreet questions in the presence of Trodstam and Pico. As evening shadows were already lowering, the car from the center arrived to pick them up, putting an end to the conversation. A soldier was driving it. And so the Ismanis and Miss Strobel, having said their goodbyes to Trodstam, leaving their heaviest baggage in his care, he would send it up the following day in another vehicle, departed for the plateau. Shortly after the checkpoint, the road climbed sharply, becoming very steep. Little could be seen now, partly because of the fog. At one point, the road ended abruptly at the base of a tall, yellow-colored sheer wall. In the dim light, Ismani did not at first see that flush with the rock face was a large iron door, Then he noticed a triple or quadruple strand barbed wire fence that began on either side, where the cliff was less steep, and some roundish things that stuck out. Insulators, perhaps, made him think that the fence was electrified. There wasn't a living soul around. It was cold and damp. The place was extremely desolate and inhospitable. The driver said, "We may have to wait a few minutes. When I came down, they were working in the tunnel. There must have been a small collapse." "Did you let them know that we're here?" Elisa Esmani asked. "There's no need," the soldier said. "They know." "How?" The driver stared at the lady, unsure whether to answer. Then, evidently persuaded by her face, without a word, he pointed at the iron door, where some kind of small panel was barely noticeable. Elisa did not ask for further explanation. It must be an electric eye, a closed-circuit TV, or some devilish device like that, she thought. "Well, I'm taking a little walk," Olga Strobel said. "Otherwise my legs will get pins and needles." "I'm going too," Ismani said, eager to learn more. To stretch their legs, they walked a dozen yards or so down the road cut into the rock face. The fog prevented him from seeing how deep the drop was. Only vague, indistinct shadows of vertical cliffs and firs clinging to improbable ledges. With a strange, pleasurable sensation that he had never had before, Ismani felt Olga Strobel take him by the arm, that woman whom it would be so nice to be able to desire. He smelled her perfume, mixed with the mist, the dampness, the hint of resin in the air. He had never smelled such a delightful fragrance. She was silent, waiting for him to speak. Perhaps on purpose, just for the fun of embarrassing the man. Ismani glanced back. In the growing mist, the car was barely visible. "So, Miss Strobel," he finally said, "here there's no one to hear us. We can talk. Can you tell me what they're doing up there at the center?" "Why, Professor," she replied teasingly, "you're really hard on me. You flunked me. And now you're trying to make fun of me too?" "My dear girl, surely you must know what your husband is doing." She burst into laughter, strange in that place. "My husband? But you know too. If they've made you come up to the center, Professor, you must be fully informed, aren't you?" "No, on the contrary, I don't know anything. They didn't tell me a thing." "Who didn't tell you?" "The people at the ministry." "And you agreed to come anyway?" "Seems so, but I'm not cut out for these mysteries. I know less than you do." "But didn't your husband explain it to you? Didn't he tell you what this mysterious center is? He must surely have told you something. You must know what they do, at least more or less, don't you?" Ismani felt the return of apprehension and dismay, the feeling of being insignificant in the face of immense, threatening things, a panic that he had once experienced in the war. "Too bad. Go ahead and flunk me, Professor. I can't answer your question." "But what is it? A production plant?" "Who knows? Giancarlo mentioned a lab." "What kind of a lab? Chemical research?" The sound of a horn was heard. "Professor, they're calling us. Open sesame, the mountain has opened, taking all its sweet time, of course. Shall we go?" She tossed away her cigarette, and the red dot of glowing embers flew into the abyss, swallowed up silently by the mist. They headed back to the car, Olga nearly running. "Well, Ismani said, struggling to keep up with her. "Well, so you really can't tell me?" She wasn't even listening. Chapter 8. By the time they arrived, it was already dark, and it was raining. For a stretch, the car had climbed up through a tunnel dug into the rock. At one point, they'd come to a widening of the passage where there were 4 large shuttered doors. Then suddenly it got dark. The light bulbs on the ceiling went out, and so did the car's headlights. "What's going on?" Ismani asked, shaken. "Nothing, sir. Just be patient a few seconds," the driver replied. In the darkness, the sound of a rolling shutter being raised could be heard. "Which of the 4? Then, without turning on the headlights, guided perhaps by a bright red dot on a small dial on the dashboard, the driver had started moving slowly. Right behind them came the rumble of the shutter being lowered, and the lights came on again. The tunnel continued, steep and winding, to a second widening, almost identical to the first, only there were 3 doors. Here the maneuver was repeated. The lights turned off, nor had they seen a living soul. After another stretch that Ismani estimated to be about 400 yards, they emerged into the open, on the plateau presumably. And now they were in front of a low, unadorned structure resembling a blockhouse, with a few small lighted windows. As soon as he stepped out of the car, Ismani looked around hoping to see something, but except for the entrance to that guard post, everything was shrouded in darkness. Nevertheless, he thought he saw, on either side of the building, a perimeter wall about 12 feet high that trailed off into the shadows. Maybe it was the final barrier. At that moment, a man in his 40s approached, nodding to greet them. Professor Giancarlo Strobel. Strobel was an elegant man, with an intense intellectual face who exuded self-confidence. Ismani, who had never seen him before, was struck, and not agreeably so, by his aplomb. suggestive of a high-born patrician. An embrace for his wife, warm introductions with the Ismanis at the doorway. They then entered the hut that was similar to the gatehouse of an industrial plant. Strobel led them through a short corridor to a door opposite the one they had entered through, and they were back outside. Awaiting them here was the car, which had meanwhile gone around the building, arriving from the side axis. Higher up, a few hundred yards away, lights glowed, as if from houses. As the rain continued, the car set off along a steep incline. Patches of meadow appeared and disappeared in the beam of the headlights, along with some rock formations and clusters of larch and fir trees. By now they were close to the lights. "Here we are," Strobel exclaimed when they got out at the entrance to a pleasant-looking chalet-style cottage. "This will be your home. Over there," he said, pointing to another cottage further down, "is where I live. That other one up there is our boss's house, Andreade. Also staying there on the first floor is Major Mirti, the Inspector General of the Ministry of Defense. Now please come in, it's cold. I hope the fireplace has been lit. To assist you, madam, there is an excellent girl, Aloisi's maid. You've met him, haven't you, Ismani?" "Aloisi?" "Yes, you didn't know him? He'd been living here for 10 years, you might say. An exceptional man. People never knew anything about his creations, yet the day will come. He died a couple of months ago." "Did he die here?" "He was crazy about hunting. He would go up the mountains alone. One night he never came back. We found him 3 days later. He'd fallen off a cliff. For us, a tragedy in every sense. What little has been achieved here at the center," he smiled calculatedly, "is owed at least 50% to Aloisi. If the misfortune had happened 4 or 5 years ago, who knows if Andreade and I, who knows if we would have been able to accomplish what—" "And me?" Ismani asked timidly, assailed by a sense of uneasiness. Did they send me up here would I be a successor?" No, I don't think so. If you were to replace anyone, that someone would be me." "You? Why? Are you leaving?" "No, not now. In a month and a half, 2 months, thank God the cycle, one might say, the cycle of my work is practically completed. Now then, here's the living room. Over that way is a small study, the office, and from there you go into the kitchen. The bedrooms are upstairs. Overall, since I've lived here for years, I can say that these cottages are well planned. The only drawback, if anything, though I confess it doesn't bother me, is the English-style wooden staircase located in the living room. Some prefer to have bedrooms completely separated. Plus, there's the problem of noise. It's true the doors are solid wood, but if someone has the radio on down here, it's hopeless. You can hear it in the bedrooms. But I believe there are just the 2 of you, and honestly, Justina is very quiet. At times she seems like a cat, the way she glides around without making a sound." Chapter 9. Ismani met Andreade and his wife shortly afterwards at dinner at the Strobel's house. He vaguely remembered seeing him briefly at some conference. Now he seemed different. He had become one of those solemn, ornamental, portentous men, the Nobel laureate type, so sure of his superior intelligence that he bordered on the theatrical. Badly dressed, with a tangled mane of long gray hair and a big nose, he had a heated, volatile way of speaking. He must have been around 55. His wife was just the opposite, a mild, modest lady in her 50s. She was silent and vaguely melancholy. Faced with such an emphatic, overbearing personality, Ismani felt less than 0. He was so obsessed with knowing that he managed to pluck up his courage. That goddamn secret that Giacinto at the ministry, Captain Vestro, Lieutenant Trodsdam, and even Strobel in their first hurried meeting, to withhold the purpose of his mission, began to seem bizarre, as though it were a plot to exacerbate him. "You may laugh," he said feverishly as soon as they were seated at the table, knowing full well that he was putting himself in an inferior position that his 2 colleagues might be encouraged to exploit. "But I am kind of an intruder here." Strobel. "Intruder? Don't you have all the qualifications?" Ismani. "Intruder, outsider, I don't know anything yet. Nothing at all." Strobel. "Nothing about what?" Ismani. "About what I'm going to be doing here. About what you're doing here." Strobel. "They must have explained it to you at the ministry, didn't they?" Ismani. "Not a word." Andreade. "Why, that's astonishing, practically unbelievable. Can it be that the measures put in place by Giacinto and his associates weren't completely hopeless? Secrecy for once. But let's hear it. Tell us, Ismani, what general idea did you have? You must have imagined something. You must be curious, aren't you?" Ismani. "Yes, at first I actually thought of the atomic bomb, but various hints, you know." Andreade. "No atomic bomb, thank God. Something much more nonviolent, let's say, yet at the same time much more dangerous, perhaps. Right, Strobel? Strobel. Dangerous? I wouldn't say dangerous. Elisa Ismani. So you won't tell us? Maybe because we women are here? Andreade, amused. You, madam, what suppositions did you make? Elisa Ismani. Me? I don't have the slightest idea. Andreade. And you, Miss Strobel? Olga casually fingered the trim of her unsettling neckline. From the way you talk, or rather don't talk, I'm afraid it's not anything exciting. Strobel. But Olga. Olga. What? I didn't offend anyone. But if you make it so mysterious, it means it's something important, and there's nothing more gloomy than important things. It would be so nice if we could do without them. All in all, you scientists are a real treasure. I'm not saying you aren't. But when you start being serious, you are so boring. Andreade. Indeed, but there's hope. Whether it's something important or not, we don't yet know. As he listened intently, his expression changed. God, what a deluge. In fact, you could hear the pelting rain accompanied by the distant rumblings of intermittent thunder. Andreade looked worried. Olga. Professor, are you afraid? Andreade. To be honest, I don't know. Elisa. Meanwhile, you are both careful not to answer. Andreade. Well, dear lady, it's very simple. Up here we have an experimental laboratory whose nature is, how shall I put it, restricted. That's accurate, isn't it, Strobel? Strobel. Very accurate. Andreade. All the same, we can say that what we're doing up here, what we're doing involves a difficult inquiry into the realm of nature. Is that accurate, Strobel? Strobel. Exactly so. Andreade. And can we also say that what's up here on the plateau is a kind of gym for training the mental faculties, a stadium with ultra-modern equipment. He laughed, pleased with himself. I believe, Strobel, that I was accurate? Strobel. Quite accurate. Andreade. So then, Ismani, satisfied? Ismani, too agitated by now to be able to laugh it off, said bleakly, I know exactly as much as I did before. Andreade laughed heartily. You are completely right, Ismani. Forgive me. You know I like to joke around every now and then. I'm sorry. So you explained the thing to him, Strobel, since you're a born professor. With obvious satisfaction, Strobel cleared his throat. My dear Ismani, to be exact, you are at the experimental camp of Military Zone 36. This is the official definition, although imprecise, where you... Olga tapped on the rim of her glasses 3 times with a knife. She seemed irritated, or was it one of her tricks? The room went silent. Excuse me, she said with a mischievous smile. You may think I'm being bossy, but I feel compelled to exercise my right as hostess. What right? Her husband asked, embarrassed. The right to ask you... Well, Andreade interrupted her, looking at his clothing as if searching for a stain. I don't think I've done or said anything monstrous. To ask you one very simple thing. Change the subject. But why? Strobel said, seeing the joy of giving his lecture taken from him. Why? I'll tell you why in due time. It seems to me a somewhat curious way of... Oh, don't make those long faces for God's sake. I'm not asking you to make such a huge sacrifice. Miss Strobel, said Ismani, who had been on tender hooks for too long, I would have honestly preferred... To know what they are doing up there at the center and so on? Isn't that right, my dear professor? But what are you afraid of? You're among friends. That's exactly why. And I should side with you of all people? You? Are you forgetting that there's a big account to settle between us? If I can get back at... My God, I thought after all these years, Ismani said, unable to take it in the proper spirit. Then his expression suddenly changed. What is that? Don't you hear it? The rain. The sound of the rain. I hear something like the sound of a church bell. A church bell? Andreade asked ironically. Up here, there are none. It was a diffuse, faint resonance, but deep, as if it were coming from a distant hollow, similar to the vibration of an immense but thin metal plate. I hear it too, Elisa Ismani said. For a few moments they were silent, listening. Then the sound faded. Well, Strobel said, I don't hear a thing. Then Andreade asked Ismani, Did you know Aloisi? No. He too said that at night. He stopped, as if listening. He seemed reassured. Then he turned to Mrs. Ismani. Smiling, he whispered to her, as if it were a secret between the two of them, though the others also heard. He was a genius. Him too, Olga asked mockingly. Yes, of course, Andreotti replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And he said that at night there were strange sounds, but I didn't believe him. I never believed him. They were fixations, and now you hear a bell, but I don't believe it. This bell does not exist. It's probably one of those unfounded hums that you think you hear when you change altitude quickly as Monty did today. However, and here his voice veered sharply and assumed an anxious tone. However, we should all be more attentive, eyes and ears open. It will never be enough. In the past years, I was more at ease. There is surveillance. There is no lack of safeguards. The interception devices are as flawless as you could wish for. And yet, I hear them all around us, day and night, like rats gnawing away to dig a road. They're not all imbeciles like at the ministry, where they think we're playing games up here and sponging off of them. There are also some who get it, or at least suspect, and are afraid, and would do anything, absolutely anything, to wreck our installation, Strobel prompted. Our installation, because only 3 of us know how far we have come, and with you, Ismani, tomorrow there will be 4 of us. No other person in the world knows, but they may have surmised something, and they're trembling. They vaguely sensed it, I'd swear. They've intuited this frightening truth, that if we here succeed, we will become, he said, pounding his fist on the table, making the dishes clatter. Andreotti, Strobel said, begging him to calm down. We will become masters of the world. Chapter 10. It was only around midnight when Ermanno and Elisa Ismani, exhausted, said their goodbyes to the Strobels and, in the pouring rain, made their way to the little house where they would live. The Andreottis, who lived further on, walked with them. Justina had already gone to bed, but they found everything prepared. Despite the strain of the trip, Ismani wasn't sleepy. Maybe it was the excitement of the strange place, the new people, his eagerness to know, the rarefied mountain air. But instead of feeling irritable and nervous, he found himself in a lively, cheerful mood, which was rather unusual for him. He felt like walking, joking, laughing. You too seem cheerful tonight, Elisa. It's true. It must be the altitude. I practically feel like a young girl. The cottage, furnished in a rustic style, was cozy and perfectly spotless. You would almost say that no one had lived there before them. As much as he nosed around, Ismani did not find a single object, not one sign that might point to Aloisi's residence there. Not even the books filling a bookcase revealed a personal character. There were scientific texts in various languages, mainly related to electrophysics, but they seemed to be there by accident, mixed in, as they were with thrillers, romance novels, historical works, and biographies, even a cookbook. It certainly didn't look like the library of a genius. As for Aloisi's most personal things, everything must have been taken away. Not a trinket, not a photograph, not a pack of cigarettes or a sheet of paper or a pin, nothing that could suggest the missing man. After finally going up to the bedroom, the first thing Ismani did was to check the windows, since he couldn't sleep in complete darkness. The shutters, as he had expected, were shut tightly. He opened one and was overwhelmed. Within minutes, once the storm had abated, the sky had completely cleared, and a bright moon now illuminated the world. Come and see, Elisa! They stood there motionless and looked out. Stretching before them, resplendent in that magical light, was the plateau, a meadowland of dips and rises with dark patches of fir trees. About 100 yards away, however, a low, irregular white structure with recesses and About 500 yards away, however, a low, irregular white structure with recesses and projections gleamed among the trees. From a distance, it was not clear if it was a simple wall or an actual building. There it is, the big mystery, Elisa said. It doesn't seem all that impressive to me. Shall we go take a look? At this hour? Don't you see what a gorgeous night it is? The grass must still be drenched. With those shoes, you'll catch a cold for sure. Not at all. If you want to know, they're perfectly waterproof. Well, put on your coat at least. They went out into the fantastic light. With the air cleansed by the storm, even things in the distance became sharp. As they made their way through a clearing, the horizon widened. Beyond the vast meadows, a wall of trees appeared, and further back behind them, a mountain range of white cliffs. Everything was still, hushed, beautiful, and awash in mystery. They approached the white structure. From what they could tell, it appeared to be a long blockhouse, which followed the steep slope. You couldn't see where it ended. The result was a complex of uniform buildings seemingly almost identical, but positioned either higher or lower, depending on the gradient of the terrain, with a picturesque effect. Between one and the other, as far as they were able to make out in the indistinct, elusive, albeit intense moonlight, there were no gaps whatsoever. All in all, they formed an unbroken barrier, similar to certain ancient military fortifications. When the couple reached the foot of the wall, fully illuminated by the moon at that point, they looked up. It must have been around 25 feet high, smooth and even, without a single window, balcony, or clear story. So these were not dwellings, nor places where men were likely to work. Rather, they were lunar-like containers housing inanimate things, such as machines which did not require air and light, or, in fact, a specialized fortification. But the redoubt, or long blockhouse, or series of pavilions, or whatever the devil you could call it, did not have the dull, dead aspect that a transformer station can have, for example, nor the hermetic apathy that pertains to tombs, so closed and focused on themselves, indifferent to life around them. After a while, Ermanno and Elisa Asmani noticed that the wall contained various apertures here and there that had escaped their earlier scrutiny, round or square openings, or thin slits protected by fine mesh. Some of them, less frequent, of circular shape, were equipped with convex, protruding lens-like crystals comparable to pupils. The moon's reflection glittered in them. Now that they were looking more closely, they also noticed a dark forest of small antennae poking from the upper edge of the wall, backlit screens, concave dishes like those for radar, thin tubes with a kind of cap on top that made them look like tiny chimney pots, and even curious tufts reminiscent of feather dusters. They were opaque and blue, so that at first glance, especially at night, it was not easy to spot them. Motionless, in the profound silence of the night, the Asmani stared at them. But it wasn't silence. "Do you hear that?" Ermanno Asmani asked. Yes, I thought I did. In fact, when you listened intently, a kind of hum came from the other side of the white wall, vast and deep, yet barely perceptible, similar to the tenuous sound that ants make when the crown of their nest is broken and the insects stream out from the cracks by the hundreds, scurrying over the rubble as if crazed. A very muffled ticking, in whose plaintive quality small irregular sounds could, from time to time, be distinguished, distant rustles, clicks, the subdued bubbling of liquids, rhythmic sighs, so faint that it was almost impossible to tell if it was real or if it was the occasional throbbing of blood in the temples. A kind of life, therefore, raged within the secret rock face, apparently asleep. For that matter, all those small, multiform antennas sticking up from the edge were not perfectly still either. Observing them at length, it seemed that minimal oscillations could be noted, a relentless travail. "What is it?" Elisa Asmani asked softly. Her husband motioned for her to be quiet. He thought he saw something moving at the base of the wall, about 50 yards away. And then, recalled by an obscure association of ideas, the bizarre threat pronounced by Andreade echoed in his head. "We will become masters of the world." At that precise moment, he spotted Andreade. The scientist was walking slowly down from the grassy slope above, as if absorbed in thought, skirting the perimeter wall and speaking aloud, seemingly to himself. In fact, not a living soul could be seen beside him. With a wide-brimmed hat on his head, flooded by moonlight, he was ungainly and dreamy. The breathtaking stillness of the night was such that, despite the distance and that vague hum, the Asmanis could make out some of his words. We can, Andreade said, "but that's not what we should." Then they saw a strange thing. Andreade stopped, turned to the wall, and for a moment Asmani thought he was going to pee. Instead, he went on talking, rapping the wall with what looked like a big stick, like a father lecturing his child. Only a few words could be heard, but enough to grasp the meaning. 3 or 4 times he repeated, I don't understand. It seemed inappropriate to Asmani to stand there watching the man and listening to him when he was unaware of it. He gave a little cough to reveal his presence. As if he'd been whipped, Andreade jumped aside abruptly, and groping about, shrank back into a cleft in the wall. Who's there? He cried, his voice frightened. From his protected niche, he pointed his big stick at Asmani, and when it glittered in the moonlight, Asmani realized that it was a rifle. Professor, it's me, Asmani. I came out with my wife to take a walk. The barrel of the gun was lowered, and Andreade came towards him. He was surly and very embarrassed. He tried to give some innocent explanation. I make the rounds, every night before going to bed. I do an inspection tour. He chuckled. Armed, of course. Major Mirti procured this excellent piece for me. It's American, high precision. And have you ever had any bad encounters? Not so far, thank God. I walk around, I watch, I think, I talk. He paused as if he were weighing whether to proceed. I talk, I plan. But you two, however, gave me a good scare, and he laughed. Then he gestured to the blockhouse. As for this, well, we'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll let you in. You'll see what it's like inside. Better by day. At night, here in the mountains is not advisable. Because of the cold? Asmani asked. Because of the cold and many other things. Andreade walked them back to the cottage. Standing in the doorway, the Ismanis watched him move down the meadow, a somewhat ludicrous and extraordinarily vivid figure. "Hermano," Ismani's wife asked. "Who was he talking to?" "No one. He was talking to himself. A lot of people talk to themselves." "There was someone. I'd swear there was someone." "We would have seen if someone had been there." "I know someone was there. I heard talking." "Talking? I didn't hear anything." "A somewhat strange voice, for sure. You probably didn't pay any attention." "You were dreaming, my dear Elisa." Chapter 11. Andriade, the Strobels, and the Ismanis went to visit the facility when the sun was already high. Beautiful weather, the looming mountains shone with their sheer white cliffs. They crossed the meadows and came to the perimeter of low walls, where Chief Engineer Manunta awaited them in front of a small iron door. Manunta opened the door, and they walked down a dimly lit narrow corridor. After Manunta opened a second door, they found themselves outside on a terrace. They were in. For a few minutes, neither the Ismanis nor Olga Strobel breathed a word. So heart-stopping was the sight before them. In front of them lay a basin, a valley with no outlet, a steep, winding crater that extended as far as the eye could see. From its bottom, where the waters of a stream might once have flowed, to the rim, the walls were entirely covered with strange, box-like structures, all attached to one another, which formed a chaotic sequence of terraces that followed the ledges and recesses of the cliff. But the cliffs were no longer visible, nor could any vegetation be seen, or land, or flowing waters. Everything had been invaded and overwhelmed by a tangled succession of buildings similar to silos, towers, mastabas, retaining walls, slender bridges, barbicans, fortifications, blockhouses, and bastions, which plunged in dizzying geometries, as though a city had crashed down the sides of a ravine. But there was an exceedingly abnormal element that gave those structures an air of enigma. There were no windows. Everything seemed hermetically sealed and blank. Another circumstance adding to the sense of something monstrous was that not a single living soul could be seen. Yet the ghastly Bolgia did not express death or abandonment. On the contrary, although nothing could be seen moving, an arcane life could be sensed stirring beneath the outer surface. How? Maybe it was the swarms of metal antennas in the most bizarre shapes that bristled from the upper rims. Or maybe it was a confused chorus of subdued hums, reverberations, whispers, distant booms, and thuds, rising above the precipitous citadel, coming and going in slow waves. And maybe it was only the cavernous rumble of silence. Maybe it was the vibrations of the solitary metal pylon antenna on the side of the valley that towered far above the upper rim. On its top was a spherical lookout post with complicated slits, which vaguely resembled an ancient helmet. That wasn't all. Despite the desolation, there was a powerful and in some way inexplicable beauty in that exceptional sight that was not the forbidding fascination of the pyramids. Fortresses, refineries, blast furnaces, or huge prison institutions. On the contrary, for some unknown reason, the seemingly chaotic vista of towers, tanks, and pavilions of every imaginable form brightened the spirit. It expressed something warm and uplifting, like certain cities of the Orient seen from the sea. What did it remind him of? Ismani had a vague feeling that, in spite of everything, it was an odd acquaintance, yet, searching his memories for a reference, he came across very different and improbable things. A garden, for instance, a river, even certain embroideries, and the sea, and forests, but beyond any connection, he was left with something elusive and disturbing. It was Olga Strobel who broke the silence. "Well," she said with forced frivolity, "what is it, a power plant?" "You see," her husband replied, flattered by her curiosity. It was very rare indeed for his wife to take an interest in his work. Then he turned to Ismani. "Do you understand now?" Maybe, Ismani said. He was troubled. His wife was silent. Farther on, Andriade, leaning against the parapet, contemplated his realm. He seemed wrapped, in a dream. Olga Strobel. "But really, what is it? Do you mind telling us?" She was wearing a white linen dress so close-fitting as to be provocative. The folds of the tenuous neckline came together at the waist. Every movement was risky. "Olga," said her husband with didactic animation. "Olga, what you are looking at is a kind of citadel, with its bell tower or minaret, he added, pointing to the antenna with his right hand. A little kingdom, hermetically closed off and apart from the rest of the world. He broke off. A flock of large birds were wheeling around the metal sphere at the top of the antenna, shrieking stridently, as if they had meant to perch there, but at the last moment had sensed danger. So then, Strobel resumed with a faint smile, to put it simply, this gigantic installation that so far has cost well over 10 years of effort it's related to us. It's a human. A human? Where? Olga asked. A human, that's right. A machine made in our likeness. And the head? Where's the head? And the arms? The legs? There are no legs. Strobel wore an irritated expression. The outer form doesn't matter. The challenge was a different one. A toy manufacturer could have been able to create just any robot. A dummy may be capable of walking on legs and saying good morning. We, on the other hand, were interested in building something that would reproduce what goes on in here. Understand? He said, tapping his forehead with his finger. Oh, an electronic brain. I've read about it in the papers. But don't you see, her husband interjected passionately, there's more to it than a brain, more than a calculator. It can compute, sure, but computation is the least of it. We went beyond that. We taught it to reason. This brute can reason better than we can. And be alive like us, Andreade added, having stood by silently until then. And be alive? But it's not moving. It's there, pinned to the ground. Sweetheart, Strobel explained, it doesn't matter whether it moves. If you take a man and tie him to the ground so that he can't move a finger, he's still a man, isn't he? And did you have to make it so big? It's a whole city, not a man. It's still much smaller than we thought. The first plan involved a complex of equipment that would fill a city like Paris. We've worked miracles. Note that what we see is only a small part. Everything else is buried and underground. Of course, it's a little unwieldy, rather corpulent. If you speak to it, does it answer? Olga asked, and laughed uncertainly. I'd show you, but there is a related interest. For example, robots that react to light, sound, colors, or contact with logical behavior are not uncommon by now. Here, I would say, we did something more. For one thing, we reproduced the 5 senses. The robot, as you say, sees, hears, and distinguishes things that are close by. Taste as well? Even smell? Ismani asked. Of course. What about touch? Olga asked. That too. See those tufts, those antennas? By touching an object, they recognize or ascertain it. Ismani. If I understand correctly, you've tried to attribute to this thing, to this installation, how shall I put it? A personality? A differentiation, yes, Strobel said. Man or woman? Olga asked. I'll bet. Strobel blushed like a child. The issue isn't relevant. A sexual conditioning didn't seem... Ismani. And you must have had a model in mind, right? A human type you referred to? Small white clouds rose over the Earth's curving horizon towards the mysterious north, like a slow shiver. Their shadows slid over the citadel, over the rambling body of the immense being lying in the valley, with incredible effects. I couldn't say precisely, Strobel said. You must have taken yourselves as a model, Olga said. You scientists think you're such geniuses. Us? Andreade decides these things. Andreade, who until then had remained leaning against the parapet, was roused. Me? He stared at the guests. He looked foggy, like someone awakened from a reverie. You must excuse me. I should go see... He strode off along a narrow walkway overhanging the precipice that farther on was lost in the recesses of the elaborate ramparts. What's wrong with him? Is he in a bad mood? Olga asked Manunta, who'd smiled. No, said the chief engineer, a fat, placid, jovial man. That's just the way he is, a little strange. The great minds, you know. I find him quite likable, Elisa Ismani said, as if to preclude some observation by Olga. Big deal, Olga said. A brilliant man. Everyone clears out when he comes by. All they have to do is see him when he approaches. Chapter 12. Strobel cleared his throat to get their attention. Now, we could even do a little sensory experiment. But if you talk to it, does it answer? Does it obey? Strobel's wife asked again. You persist in seeing the problem exactly the opposite. You might say of the way we do, Olga, Strobel said. Whether it answers or not is completely immaterial to us. It doesn't have to act. It has to think. But does it understand what we say? That, to be truthful, is an unknown. There's no technical reason why it would need to understand us. Still, we have established that this machine has resources that we had never dreamed of. I wouldn't be surprised if... And what did you christen it? Number 2. Officially, as they say, it's number 1. I call it our friend. Manunta says, the baby. Andreade always refers to it as she, the little creature. She? She. And some days he likes to joke around. He even gives it women's names. What names? Names. Just names. I don't remember. They all looked in the same direction. After disappearing around the corner of a pavilion, Andreade had reappeared much further on and higher up, on the rim of a long geometric surface that dominated an area of the citadel. He'd stopped and leaned over the metal balustrade, and he seemed to be talking to someone down below. Who on earth is he talking to? Strobel. He must be talking to himself. An old habit of his. Yes, Elisa Ismani said. We heard him too, last night. We went for a walk in the moonlight and ran into him. In fact, he gave us a scare. He was talking, but he was talking out loud. Excuse me, Giancarlo, Strobel's wife said, interrupting. Does she, the machine, speak? Speak in a normal sense? No, it doesn't know any languages. On that score, we've been categorical. Heaven help us if we had taught it a language. Language is the worst enemy of mental clarity. In his desire to express his thought in words at all costs, man has ended up making such messes. So it's mute? Tell us, Manunta, Strobel turned to the chief engineer. You tell us. Is our friend mute? You, Professor, are making fun of me, Manunta said good-naturedly, pointing threateningly at him. Yet you know better than I. Here now, for example. He held up a finger as if asking for silence. No one spoke. A curious sound, something resembling the murmur of water, a faint rustling, a subdued whistling, drifted through the air, interrupted sporadically by pauses, clicks, quivers. It came and went with capricious sighs. And if you listened and listened, you could also make out vowels and consonants, though not articulated, an impenetrable confusion that recalled the frantic, incomprehensible rush of words when the reel on a tape recorder is dizzily rewound. Was it a voice? Was it a meaningless sound of machinery? Or was there intention in it, a strand of thought, or a laugh? Is that it? Strobel asked the chief engineer. The man nodded. And you understand it, don't you? I myself heard you say one day that you understood it, as if it were your language. Go on, translate then. What is it saying now? Manunta tried to get out of it. Who, me? What do you expect me to understand? That day, clearly, I must have been joking. Maybe Professor Andreade can tell you. Strobel made a scornful face. You too, you crazy fools. You and that Superman Andreade. To hear you talk. He turned to his wife. You don't believe him, I hope. These are the machine's workings. The valves, selectors, feedback systems, and so on. There are hundreds of thousands of mechanisms. It's logical that they would produce sounds. And this? Eliza Ismani asked. This what? Strobel said. Don't you hear it? The faint voice had abruptly vanished. Now silence once again hung heavy over the basin of the immense installation. But was it silence? At first, to a distracted listener, nothing could be heard. Then, little by little, from the silence itself came an almost imperceptible resonance. It was as if a hum of life, a vibration from the depths, an indefinable reverberation were radiating from the overall complex of the machine, from the global vastness of the apocalyptic valley. Slowly, to their astonished ears, a melodious sonority arose, its substance so tenuous as to make you doubt whether it was real or a hypnotic suggestion. Perhaps a colossal breath rising and falling calmly, a sovereign ocean wave that occasionally receded with joyous eddies in the clefts of the smooth cliffs. Or maybe it was just the wind, the air, the movement of the atmosphere, because nothing like this had ever existed in the world. Cliff, fortress, labyrinth, castle, and forest together as one, whose innumerable forms, with their myriad openings, lent themselves to unprecedented intonations. But more so than the sound, or the rumble, or the breath, one perceived a presence, an invisible tide, a latent compressed force, almost as though an army of endless regiments lay beneath the surface of all those structures, or rather as if a mythical giant, his limbs like mountains, were drowsing, half asleep, or better yet, as if a sea of warm, vivid young flesh were heaving. Not a savage presence, though, not hostile, not a lurking, menacing power, not a nightmare or a monster, because beyond all other perceptions, those present were left with an inexplicable sense of contentment and brightness, an indulgent, smiling frame of mind, like after hearing certain music. "Holy Mother of God!" Olga Strobel exclaimed. "Never heard anything like it. It's almost scary." "Why scary?" Elisa Ismanis asked. "It's so beautiful. I don't know. It reminds me of something. It may sound ridiculous, but it reminds me of something specific, and I can't... Strange." "Now watch," Strobel interrupted, ignoring Mrs. Mani's words. "A little experiment. You, Ismani, stand where you are." Ismani didn't know whether Strobel or Minunta had pressed a hidden button or activated a photoelectric cell or uttered a formula capable of starting up some mechanical apparatus. "This is an interesting little test of visual memory," Strobel said. "Here now, watch." As he spoke from the top of the wall that enclosed the terrace on the right, the wall of one of the many pavilions or exchanges or blockhouses, cells of the frightening being, a bright, opaque metal antenna leaned down to the group of 5, a tuft resembling a soft whisk broom dangling from its tip, extending like a phantograph, silently, with a live, spider-like motion. The antenna scratched out towards Ismani and gently lowered the large tassel, which they could now see was made of numerous, pliable metal wires. "You're too far away, Ismani. It can't reach you. Can you move closer?" The antenna was now swaying up and down as if it were looking for something. Ismani hesitated with a frightened smile. "I'll go," Olga quickly exclaimed, and stepped under the feather duster. The arm slowly descended, and the yielding mass of wire strands brushed the woman's head. Moving even lower, it then covered her down to her waist, like a soft, lightweight hood falling all around her torso. "Oh, that tickles. It gives me the creeps for sure." "That's enough, ma'am. Step away," Minunta mumbled as though embarrassed. But the antenna rose abruptly, freeing Miss Strobel. It was a swift movement, almost like a gesture of repugnance. The woman straightened her hair. She smiled, but she was pale. At that instant, over the vague hum that drifted around them, the voice could be heard. That faint murmur they'd heard before. It strengthened, described a kind of arc, touched acute resonances, then fell away, broke into a brief, fitful cackling, went on fading and died out. The groan of a machine? The screech of friction? The vibration of something tightening and releasing? They were silent. Then Strobel spoke. "You, Minunta, what did you understand of it? What did it say?" Minunta, ignoring his ironic smile, said, "Well, this time I didn't understand a thing." He thought about it, but it seemed to be laughing. "I'm cold," Olga Strobel said. "Cold? On a day like this?" "Yes, cold. I'm going back." "You were frightened, weren't you? It's just a little game." Strobel almost seemed to be apologizing to Ismani. "Let's put it this way. An unnecessary stupidity. It's part of the early installations. They were still experiments. In any case, Olga, go home if you want to. I'm going to stay and chat with Ismani." The two women left. Minunta accompanied them to the exit. As they were leaving the terrace, a metallic click came from the silo-shaped thing about 20 yards away. Everyone quickly turned around, but there was nothing moving, not even the antenna with the little tuft. Chapter 13. "For many years, my dear Ismani," Andreade said, "ever since I was a young man, even before receiving my degree, I have been obsessed by a question. Does the so-called light of the spirit, in order to form and exist, strictly require man? Is everything external to us dark? Or can this phenomenon, interesting I would say, also be created elsewhere, as long as a body, an organism, an instrument, a suitable vessel is found?" The two of them were alone in the living room of Andreade's cottage. A clock on the wall read 2:30 in the morning. There was the deep silence of the night, though with that vague hum beneath it, almost like that of a distant waterfall. "An automaton, you mean?" Ismani asked. "Hold on. Have you ever considered the strange path of life through the millennia of millennia? At the beginning, who were we? Protozoa? Coelenterata? Sensibility existed, but it was rudimentary. The spirit, what is called the soul, had not yet been born. Or rather, it was a flame, so tiny, timid, and faltering that differentiating it from the vegetable world was barely demonstrable. Mind you, dearest Monty, I am not speaking in scientific terms here. I'm telling you a kind of parable so you can get a clear idea of the whole business. Do you think I don't see your curiosity, your discomfiture, your skepticism? What is the point, you're wondering, of this tremendous effort? It would be madness, worse yet, criminal foolishness to have created this chaos to obtain a travesty of the brain, for a robot capable of computing, of logging, of recalling impressions, of laughing, crying, sneezing, or solving problems. What then? Well then, little by little, as millennia went by, evolution, the progress of rational faculties, or at any rate conditioned reflexes, or at least sensibility, do you see, at some point in this interminable journey, voila, the phenomenon that I call the most mind-blowing enormity ever recorded in the history of creation. Ismani laughed. Man? Man, Andreade nodded, in whom, with positively precipitous speed, within a few million years, you could say, a deformation was produced. A case of gigantism, a tumescence that I very nearly doubt was intended in the initial plan of creation, so little does it align with all the rest. A deformation? That's right. The cerebral mass becomes increasingly dominant. The skull expands, the nervous system reaches a complexity that is frightening. In short, man's intellect progressively outdistances that of all the other animals. Would you like to talk about the divine breath here, my dear Ismani? Let's talk about it. The phenomenon, considered objectively, does not change. But I don't see what relation. Hear me out. One more phase. The matter is absolutely obvious, but I have to tell you everything. So then, well, developing abnormally, at some point man's brain, his nervous system, and his overall sensibility, at a certain point, my dear colleague, an imponderable element entered the scene. An incorporeal extension of the body, an invisible yet sensitive growth, a protuberance that has no precise dimensions, weight, or shape, which we don't know for sure even exists, scientifically speaking, but that poses so many different curiosities for us. The soul. And number one would be... One more moment. Be patient. I posit, and this is the fundamental point, I posit, if we build a machine that reproduces our mental activity without the lead weight of being tied to a particular language, a machine that processes and solves problems infinitely faster than a human and with much less probability of error. Can we speak of intelligence? No. Intelligence, to exist, needs a minimum of autonomy, freedom. But if instead we build number one, is that what you mean? Yes, exactly. If we were to build, I'm not saying that we'd succeed, but if we built a machine that has perceptions like us, that thinks like us, a question of money by now, a matter of time and effort, why should that scare us? If we can manage to build it, that famous product, that impalpable essence, though I mean the indefatigable flow of ideas that never rests, even in sleep, there's more. Not only thought, but its individualization, its distinctive character, in short, that puff of air that sometimes weighs on us as if it were lead, the soul. The soul would then automatically settle in there. Different from ours? So what? What would it matter if the container, instead of flesh, were made of metal? Isn't stone alive too? Ismani shook his head. If Monsignor Rizzieri were around to hear us. Not likely, Andreade said, smiling. There is no theological difficulty. Should God maybe be jealous? Doesn't everything come from him anyway? Materialism, determinism. It's a completely different problem. No heresies in the eyes of the church fathers. On the contrary. A discretion of nature, they would say, the supreme sin of pride. Nature? But it would be its greatest triumph. And afterwards, what benefit would this immense labor bring about? The objective, my dear Ismani, goes beyond that which man has ever attempted, but it is so grand, so marvelous, that it's worth expending even our last breath on it. You're thinking, the day this brain will be greater, more powerful, more perfect, more intelligent than ours, that day won't be as great as, how shall I put it? I'm not a philosopher. A superhuman sensibility and rational power will also correspond to a superhuman spirit. And won't that day be the most glorious in history? At that time, a spiritual power that the world has never known will emanate from the machine, an irrepressible, beneficial flow. The machine will read our thoughts, create masterpieces, reveal the most hidden mysteries. And what if one day the automaton's way of thinking eschewed your commands and acted on its own? It's what we're hoping for. It would mean success. Without freedom, what kind of spirit would it be? And what if, with a soul like ours, it becomes corrupt like us? Could action be taken to correct it? And with its awesome intelligence, wouldn't it be able to deceive us? But it was born pure, just like Adam. Hence its superiority. It isn't stained with original sin. He fell silent. Ismani scratched his chin, puzzled. And your installation, number 1, would be... Exactly. It's a prototype. And we have good reason to believe that it thinks like us? I hope so. And how does it communicate? In what language? No language. Every language is a trap for the mind. We reproduce the functioning of human thought, starting with the primary elements. The description of the relationship between words and things that are named was replaced by a description expressed in terms of activity. It's Chikatiev's old ingenious system again. Every mental combination translates into a graph that records its history in full, while allowing us to quickly grasp it. It is the actual footprint of thought, without any reference to this or that language. And by what means? Magnetic wire. With a very simple system, visible patterns are obtained from this wire. And to interpret them? It's a matter of familiarizing yourself with it. By now, I read them faster than print. Of course, this is a hindrance, but then there's sound that helps. In addition to a visible graph, you can derive sound from the magnetic wire, and with extensive experience, you can understand it. You, Andriade, do you understand it? I imagine it must be like a whistle or a whine. Exactly so. Sometimes I'm able to. It's the sound of thinking itself, a strange, exciting feeling. However, understanding or not understanding depends on a special sensibility. But take me, for example. Given that I'm an outsider, how could this number 1 communicate with me? Well now, it's one of your assignments, my dear Ismani. You have to make a kind of dictionary of the mental operations. Find, insofar as possible, the corresponding word for each combination of signs. And you, Andriade, how are you able to communicate with the machine? Does it understand our language? Orders and messages are communicated by means of punch cards, but this is not to rule out that she, the machine, may understand our speech, at least in part. It would be monstrous. I hear you, dear Ismani. You don't believe it, and in a way you have every reason not to. But you'll see. You'll see. We've already come a long way, and we'll get there. By now I'm confident. The worst is behind us. The road ahead is the easiest. Yes, we'll create a Superman. Even better, for the demiurge, a kind of god. This is the way for us to finally redeem ourselves from misery and loneliness. It's frightening. At some point, it will be materially impossible to control everything that happens in such a mind. Precisely. It's what already happens in our number 1, but there's no need to worry. The conditions created by us are sound. We can sleep peacefully. And it? What about it? Does it sleep at night? Does it ever rest? Actually sleep? I would say no. Rather, it dozes. At night, all of its activity is reduced. Do you decrease the energy supply? No, it quiets down on its own, just as if it were tired. And does it also dream? Chapter 14. It was a gorgeous June day. Around 10, while her husband was with Strobel and Minunta, being initiated into the mysteries of number 1, Elisa Ismani, not knowing what to do with herself, went to visit Miss Andriade. It's very lovely here. In a way, it's always cheerful, Luciana had said to her at their first meeting. But for us women, it can be boring some days. When that happens to you, when you don't have anything better to do, come and see me. Anytime. Even in the morning. I tend to my plants in the morning. The flower beds are beautiful, you'll see. She had told her this with such a sincere, warm tone that now, practically right after her arrival, you might say, Elisa Ismani went to see her. And in the morning, too. That memorable June morning. The Andriades' cottage stood at the top of the road that climbed steeply up the sloping meadow. About 100 yards away, the edge of the secret citadel stretched alongside it to the right. The front door was ajar. Not seeing a doorbell, Elisa waited to see if she could hear voices from within, but there didn't seem to be a living soul around. Hello? Hello? She finally called loudly. Come in, a man's voice replied, annoyed. She pushed open the door and went in to find a spacious living room furnished with nearly austere simplicity. A couple of sofas, a few wicker armchairs, a writing desk, a type of trumeau, a few old prints on the walls. Nothing could be more conventional, but spotless and quiet. "Hello? May I come in?" Elisa Ismani asked, not seeing anyone. A door opened and Andreade appeared without a tie, wearing an old sweater. "Oh, good morning, madam. You must be looking for Luciana, right? I think she's outside in the garden. I'll call her for you." He appeared anything but enthusiastic about the visit. Busy, impatient to get back to his own business. There was something feverish in his eyes, his movements, his way of speaking, as on the first night they had met. Sit down, please." As Elisa passed the desk on her way to sit on one of the two sofas, her eyes fell on a small portrait photo in a silver frame, half hidden among the stacks of folders and books. She stopped for a moment, surprised, then bent down to get a better look. "Excuse me," she said. "I would have sworn that... But it's her. It can't be anyone else." "Who?" Andreade asked, suddenly interested. "An old friend of mine. Laura De Marchi." Andreade went over to her, uneasy. "Did you know her?" "Know her? For 10 years we lived together, you might say. Inseparable schoolmates. Then she left for Switzerland with her family. We haven't seen each other since. But how come?" Andreade stared at her as if possessed. "My first wife," he whispered. "But..." Elisa Ismani didn't know anything about it. "Did you know her very well?" Andreade persisted. "More than if she were a sister. But by now it must be 15 years at least. Not a word. I never heard anything more from her." Andreade seemed lost in thought, as if swept away by a surge of memories. Then he smiled tenderly. "Loretta," he said softly. "Loretta, she's been gone 11 years. I don't understand." "Dead. A car accident." They went silent. "Was she the one driving, Andreade?" "It was someone else. I had waited all night. A kind of hell. Then at dawn the phone rang. The police informed me. They died instantly, both of them. She and the other man." He stressed the last word. Elisa expected to feel a pain of grief, but she felt no grief. Loretta, a distant image, a fairy tale, something that never existed. It had been so many years. Grief, however, stood in front of her. A dark shadow had suddenly fallen over Andreade's face. "The other man," he said slowly. "You, madam, are looking at me. I know what you're thinking. The other man. Do you think I don't know, maybe? Do you think I didn't know? But you who knew her, go on, tell me. Can I blame her?" Andreade had grasped her wrist and was clutching it tightly. "They laughed at me, undoubtedly. That imbecile Andreade with his head in the clouds, and meanwhile he doesn't notice that his wife... How could I not notice? After not even a year of marriage, ambiguous words, allusions, the anonymous letter, inevitable. And then the proof. The proof, you understand, that no delusion can withstand. What more did I want? But I'm a coward, you know. How could I do without her? Just the thought of losing her. Oh, how happy I was, and I didn't know it." The great Andreade, the genius, sank down on the sofa, covering his face with his hands, shaken by sobs. Elisa was astonished not to feel any hint of discomfort. It seemed so natural to her, that story, so like Laura's character. "I'm sorry, Andreade, that I was to blame for..." The man raised his head. A kind of hope lit up his face. "But you, madam, you understand me, don't you? Loretta, remember how she was. A silly little fool. A silly little fool is what she was," he said, and smiled indulgently. "Just seeing her in the evening when I came home was enough for me. I knew she constantly betrayed me. She lied. God only knows how many times she told me. And yet, I just needed to see her. The sound of her voice, that girlish smile of hers. You remember it, don't you, her smile? The way she moved, walked, sat, slept, bathed. Her coughing, her sneezing, those didn't bother me either. So she lied. But can you say she lied? That's how she was. When she smiled at me, when she hugged me, that certainly wasn't a lie. Do you know what I mean?" "Oh, I remember her." "A child, a little creature, radiance, like a tree, like a flowering plant." Andreade was now talking to himself. "And I knew, yes I did, I knew how horrible it would be if she were to leave. A coward? Was I a coward? How idiotic people are. What was I supposed to do? Make two happy people into two disconsolate souls? For what purpose? To satisfy the conformists? To hell with them." He pulled himself together. He looked at Elisa Ismani with a changed expression. He took her by the wrist again, gently this time. Come, he stood up. Your name is? Elisa. Come, Elisa, we must become friends. Promise me? Of course. Swear. I swear. Friends, you see, to the point of being able to tell each other everything. Everything, do you understand? Unreservedly. Elisa Ismani laughed. Some kind of conspiracy? You're nearly scaring me, Andreade. A conspiracy. Come, Elisa, I must show you. What? A secret, Andreade said. He was ablaze with life. A formidable secret. Nothing bad, though. Are you serious? Come. He went to the window and glanced out. Luciana is out there in the garden. She doesn't know you're here. We have time. Let's go. He opened a door. They found themselves outside on a concrete walkway with a railing that continued on, skirting a rocky slope for about 50 yards or so before meeting the installation's perimeter wall. Andreade preceded her. Halfway along the walkway, he turned and stopped. Tell me, he asked in a tone that was dead serious, if you met her, would you recognize her? Who? Loretta. But didn't you tell me that she's dead? Dead and buried. It's been 11 years. But would you recognize her? Andreade, I don't know what to think. He didn't say anything more. With Elisa following him, he continued on to the end of the walkway. Here in the white wall was a small iron door. He took out a bunch of keys, unlocked the door, and pressed a light switch. They entered a narrow corridor, at the end of which was another iron door. He opened it with another key, and they emerged onto a terrace. Elisa squinted her eyes tightly, blinded by the sun's brilliance. Before them stretched the desolate, seething immensity of number 1. Andreade stood motionless. He stared at his cyclopean creation as though spellbound. Ever so slowly, his lips formed a smile of relief. Loretta, he whispered. They were silent, gazing out, until Andreade shook his head and studied Elisa Ismani. Aggressive and authoritarian, he demanded, Would you recognize her? I think so. Well then, Elisa, so, don't you recognize her? A thought crossed her mind, so absurd that it was gone in a fraction of a second. Then came the disquieting suspicion that Andreade had lost his mind. Well, say something. Don't you recognize her? Where? She had to say something. Andreade had a burst of impatience. No, if you're afraid, we can't see eye to eye anymore. I'm not crazy. Do you recognize her? But where? There. With a sweeping gesture, he took in the astounding valley populated by enigmatic forms, where as far as the eye could see, only inanimate things existed. In a dizzying maze of terraces, projections, towers, antennas, pinnacles, domes, stark, powerful geometries. I don't understand, Elisa said, precisely because she was beginning to understand. And the voice? Andreade pressed her. Listen, wouldn't you recognize the voice? She tried to listen. As on the day she entered the monstrous citadel for the first time, a faint voice rose from a grim hive of silence, reminiscent of a young grass snake. It wasn't clear whether it was coming from a single source or from many. With strange inflections and pauses and an incredible variety of timbres, it rose and fell around them, and seemed to be about to express itself in human discourse at any moment. But each time, when it reached that point, it receded, fading into a sigh. Do you hear it? Do you? Is it her? Andreade pleaded for an answer. At this point, Elisa Ismani knew. The incredible reality rushed into her mind, making her tremble. My God, she cried and backed away. Is it her? Andreade stopped her, his hands on her shoulders, and shook her. Is it? Well, say something. Did you recognize her? Recognize, yes. That friend from far-off years. The young girl, the breezy, carefree creature who in life had spread nothing but joy around her. A flower, a puffy cloud, a little girl now lay before her, immobilized in a ghastly reincarnation of gigantic dimensions. Andreade had created the immense artificial brain, the automaton, the Superman, the boundless fortification endowed with reason in the image and likeness of the woman he loved. There was no face, no mouth, no limbs, but by some obscure spell, Laura had returned to the world, crystallized in a frightening metamorphosis. Those terraces, those walls, those pinnacles, those blockhouses were her body. Elisa Ismani, while rejecting the thought, was now beginning to see the diabolical resemblance. Crazy, yes, and yet in the very arrangement of the architectural masses, if she squinted ever so slightly, there was an intense evocation of lost memories in those lines, a human similarity, a tender, sensual affection in those projections and recesses. And that's not all. Slowly, from the seemingly chaotic jumble of walls, angles, and geometric profiles, a character emerged. A typical expression, something joyful, spirited, blithe. No longer an installation, fortress, production facility, or power plant. Simply a woman. Young, alive, captivating, made of concrete and metal instead of flesh, yet miraculously a woman. Her. Laura. And she was still beautiful, incredibly beautiful, maybe more beautiful than when she was alive. Andreade at her side was feverishly eager for confirmation. You see, Elisa? You recognized her, didn't you? And the voice, isn't it hers? Elisa nodded. Composed of electronic impulses, artificial vibrations, and jellied matter, yet it was her voice, Laura's. Not uttering words, but inarticulate sounds, as if she were gagged, or speaking with her mouth closed, or talking baby talk. It was virtually divine and frightening all at the same time. Elisa, do you understand her? What? I mean, can you decipher it, make sense of what she says? Even for a strong, determined woman like Elisa Ismani, the impression was too brutal. She was overwhelmed and groped for a support. No, no, she cried in a breathless sob and burst into tears. I can't believe it. Poor Laura. Chapter 15. The first concept. It's been 11 years. I was in the dark. Darkness all around, day and night. She was gone. Do you understand, Elisa? What could I be anymore? The sun had gone out. I was drifting, like a sleepwalker. I was convinced I was miserable. I was convinced, I say. In actuality, I didn't understand a thing. True misery, the despair that eats away inside us, is something different. I thought I was destroyed, yes. But maybe, just maybe, the mere thought of it is horrible. I was finally free. But man is doomed to torment himself. He doesn't see the consolations offered to him, right there within reach. He has to constantly fabricate new agonies for himself. I do, at least. Now, it's so difficult to make you understand. Now, I regret those times when I thought I was finished. Laura was dead. I was alone. But later I'll tell you. I'll explain it to you. I imagined myself to be the most unfortunate man on earth, and I was looking for something to cling to. Studies. I buried myself in my studies. Day or night, there was no longer a difference, like a man possessed. I didn't realize, idiot that I am, that I was all right, that my obsession with Laura was over. I was capable of working like in the old days. And just at that time, they called me to the ministry in great secrecy, the famous project. It was the plan for, let's say, for number 1. It had been languishing amid the heaps of papers for at least 7 years. They had let it get covered in dust. They called me. They told me the time had come. Oh, I must admit they had some grand ideas, those at the ministry. No spending limit, understand? Billions tossed there in front of me like pebbles, as much as I liked. The old dream. But now I was completely uninterested. That's how we men are, wretched flesh. They were alone, Andreade and Elisa Ismani, in the woods. After leaving the automaton citadel, they'd walked up through the meadows to where the trees began. They continued on into the shadows. With me was Aloisi, younger than me, a genius, a dreamy type, worse than me. He knew Laura. He knew her very well, if you know what I mean. What a handsome man he was. A Siegfried, or an angel, that's what he looked like. And I sensed that between him and Laura, in a way it was fated. But like so many other times, I said nothing. And he said nothing. Then she died. Could I hate him after that? He sighed. To create a Superman, on a par with us, and even more perfect, it could be called an immense effort or persistence to reach the point we had. But so-called consciousness? The awareness of feeling and desires. The center of the soul? It was Aloisi who made the decisive leap. A great invention, the essence of the creature, its character, the mysterious stamp that distinguishes us from one another, enclosed in a minimal space. To see it, in comparison with all the rest, it seems ridiculous. A glass egg, a few feet tall, you'll see, with science's supreme masterpiece inside it. I myself don't know the secret. Aloisi took it with him to the grave. His papers, his notes, we were no longer able to find them. I remember the day he first told me about it. Who should we bring into the world, he asked me, and one would have said he was joking. A man? A woman? A conqueror? A saint? My tremendous fixation, my obsession was there, lying in wait. Could the incredible opportunity be passed up? For the first time in the history of the world, a dead person. Elisa, understand? A dead person could be brought back, as she'd been, without the body she'd had before. But what does the body matter when one is suffering? Laura, I said to him, Can you bring Laura back?" Aloisi looked at me. I will always remember those eyes of an archangel, the flash, a glitter of regret, fear, hope, the same hope as mine, though mine was greater. It was months of madness. I'd been remarried for a year. It wasn't a matter of love with Luciana. She had been my assistant for a long time, good and faithful. Without her, after the accident, who knows if I would have carried on. She didn't ask anything of me. She simply adored me. I don't even know if she was happy marrying me. Everything was so natural and simple. A big heart, I must say. Jealous of my grief? Who knows? Maybe she always tried to hide it. Seeing me resume work again, Luciana believed that I had been freed. And meanwhile, I was working to have Laura back. Quite a joke, isn't it? And ignoble. A lie 100 times worse than the ones Loretta fabricated, too. Even now, Luciana doesn't know. Alas, if she knew. Enough. It would be absurd to try to explain to you how number one was created. The first great challenge was to design the rational faculties to operate on abstract values. This was the foundation, but precisely because it's logical, its construction turned out to be relatively simple. It was more difficult to attach sensory data. At that point, everything got terribly complicated. Each of the stimuli, visual, sonorous, tactile, etc., not only had to be recorded in the archives, but linked to all the other sensory nuclei, and then integrated, evaluated, and situated in a rational framework, subjected to critical judgment, after which an impulse to act might or might not be obtained. But are you following me, Elisa? I'm afraid you... No, it's extremely interesting. Then there was the matter of freedom. If we wanted to create an autonomous thought, at some point we had to let the automaton be independent. Determinism, yes, but the determination could not come only from us. Otherwise, what would we be left with? A slavish, passive machine. Eventually, leaving the creature on her own was inevitable. At some point, after endowing her with all the proper parts, we had to give up control of any subsequent steps. Apart from the dizzying complexity of the elements involved, beyond a certain limit, a kind of capriciousness, willfulness, free choice could be observed on the part of the automaton. The human mind, at least, is not capable of following the course of her thoughts, especially since, at any given moment, we are only able to think of one thing, whereas our creature is able to simultaneously perform as many as 7 mental operations, independent of one another, and yet contained in a single consciousness. In short, before we knew it, we had lost the reins, and all that was left for us to do was to record the machine's behavior. Think of a river in the karst, subsiding into a sinkhole and then reappearing a few miles further on. What the water did while underground, no one is able to know. Now, Elisa, have you ever wondered where our sense of freedom comes from? What its initial origin is, the primary indispensable condition that makes us feel we are in control, even in prison, even during a fatal illness, without which we would only lose our minds. Dear God, Elisa Ismani said. I admit I'd never thought about those enigmas. What I mean, Andreade said, is that life would be unbearable, even in the happiest conditions, if we were denied the possibility of suicide. No one thinks about it, you understand, but can you imagine what the world would be like if one day we knew that no one could dispose of his own life? A terrifying prison. Crazy we'd become. So even for your machine, even for her, in order for her to live like us, she had to have the capability of annihilating herself. But how? The simplest thing, for that matter, a good charge of explosives, which she could command. And you gave it to her? Andreade lowered his voice. We made her think so. The device exists, but instead of TNT, it contains an innocuous substance, as long as she doesn't know, with her temper, Loretta, in a fit of rage, would be capable of. And then, day X arrived, Andreade continued, the decisive moment when the being created by us would operate as a unit, independently, and we could no longer intervene. Until that day, it was nothing but a jumble of mechanisms and circuits, a vulgar electronic brain. Now the vital point conceived by Aloisi, the personality cell, the glass egg that I mentioned, the creature's intimate essence, would come into play. From there, through the automatic balancing of inertial compensations, the light of consciousness would emanate, with the ability to experience pleasure and suffering. But might there be some error? Were the calculations accurate? What would really happen? Who would come into the world, Laura or an unknown, unforeseeable being? All we had to do was lower the lever of a switch. A difficult moment, I would say, everyone holding his breath. But the others, Elisa Ismani asked, did they know about Laura? Only Aloisi and I knew. For the others, it was simply number one. Who lowered the lever?" "I did, with this hand. And I thought, Laura, in a moment, maybe you'll be here with us again." "And then?" "Apparently nothing. The millions of circuits received the current, the magnetized wires began to wind around the reels, reporting and conveying information. The only thing heard throughout the valley was a kind of hum. I thought I couldn't take it. I was so breathless. Then something seemed to catch. The hum stopped, and for a moment I thought everything had gone to hell. I looked at Aloisi, who was standing behind me. He understood. He shook his head. He was smiling. At that moment the murmuring resumed. It was like an immense breath. The automaton, number one, the creature was coming alive. But was it Laura, or some other presence? Minunta, I remember, brought me the first data emitted by the robot. It's complicated to explain. Imagine a ribbon with a lot of horizontal dashes on it, of different lengths, and arranged in various ways. It's a graphic representation of mental activities. It's not a language. It's a tracing of thinking itself. An absolute language. A complex business, yes, indeed. Reading it takes long practice. Up until now. In the future, perhaps, they'll find a way to automatically translate it into a language. That's just what I'd like Ismani, your husband, to do. Well, I looked at those first tapes. Truthfully, not very impressive. Some generic information. Descriptions of the weather, sightings of a plane and some kind of eagle. Adjustment of a calculation performed 2 days earlier, since for the crucial startup, number one had been functioning for some time already. Though still devoid of consciousness, so to speak, without the simultaneous correlation of all of its activities. Just then, there it was. Something we hadn't even hoped for. The absolute confirmation. The voice. It's a phenomenon that is largely unexplainable. We had not bothered to give the machine a vocal organ. If anything, a voice might be of use for the general public, as in freak show robots, a technical virtuosity, nothing more. But for our purpose, it wasn't needed. And yet, though we still don't know how, a voice materialized. You heard it, Elisa. It's not the inevitable sound of thousands and thousands of mechanisms in motion. It's a separate thing, an autonomous vibration that originates simultaneously and with equal intensity from various compartments. Now here, now there. At first I thought the machine had broken. Then I thought I recognized the tone, the timbre, the expression. The most overwhelming experience of my life. Inarticulate sounds. I didn't have the slightest idea what they meant, but I recognized Laura. Elisa, can you picture a kind of electronic music, where the human voice, the words, are transformed, and though you can no longer grasp the words, the expression remains, indeed is accentuated to the maximum? The words, the phrases don't exist, yet the music fully speaks to you just the same. Not the indeterminate, polyvalent idiom of classical music, but a speech of extreme precision, even more precise in a sense than normal articulated speech. So then, the voice. And I immediately related it to the outward manifestations of thought on the magnetic wire, consistent with the formulas of Chikatiev. And I wondered, could that incomprehensible voice by any chance correspond to those impulses? Right away we ran a test. All it required was for us to translate the magnetic band into sound, and the result was striking, the exact same sound. But what was steadily recorded on the wires did not coincide with the modulations of the voice. The voice was an independent thing. It left no trace in the archives. What was it saying? This took place about 10 months ago. You can imagine how I persisted in getting to the bottom of it. To decipher that voice, a brutal effort. First to interpret, based on our module, the normal magnetic wires from the automaton. And to that point the operation was anticipated. Once the meaning was obtained, to derive a phonic effect from the same wires, then correlate those nebulous sounds with the already known meanings. Find the matches, and train the ear to grasp the slightest nuances in them. A bit like someone learning English. Between the written words and the spoken words, there seems to be no connection. Then gradually you get used to it. But it was 100 times harder and more abstruse. Still, I did it. And now you understand everything she says? Just about. And only you understand, no one else? Minunta does, not quite as well as I do. But almost. Minunta's a good man. He likes me. He won't ever give me away. What about Strobel? Strobel, I think you've already seen for yourself. A great technician, Strobel. Without him, we wouldn't have gotten off the ground. A perfect planner. As for the rest, a complete imbecile. How do you expect him to understand these things? And Aloisi? I am certain that Aloisi understood the voice at least as well as I, but Aloisi never said so. And I didn't ask him either. Don't laugh. Laura was standing between us again, dividing us. Then Aloisi killed himself in the mountains. Maybe it's better that way. And Laura, did you recognize her right away? Immediately. For me, and probably for Aloisi as well. The biggest thrill of our lives. From this horrendous fortress constructed with numbers came the sound of a woman. Of that one woman who for years had consumed my thoughts. For a moment, I confess, I virtually felt like a god. To succeed in creating a living being out of nothing, out of dead matter? Aloisi was beside me, and he looked at me. He kept looking at me. Not joyfully, however, not with any expression of triumph. "What's wrong?" I asked him. "Don't you recognize her? It's her voice, isn't it?" He stood there uncertain. "The voice, yes," he said, "but it's not her." What did he mean? The voice was Laura's, just the voice. The rest, what is commonly called the personality, was that of someone else, of any unknown, interchangeable being. Or rather, on the whole, it was her, but something was still missing. The mark, that mysterious essence that makes each of us unique in the world. Give up? Or start all over again? I admit that without Aloisi, I would have abandoned the struggle. But Aloisi knew Laura as I did, maybe better than I. We closeted ourselves in the labyrinths of the automaton. We shut it all down, and number one went back to being something voiceless and dead. And here, it is impossible for me to explain to you, dear Elisa, what the work was like altering a brain, like rectifying a soul. The mistake had been to rebuild Laura as I wished she were, good, faithful, passionate, so different from how she was. For it to really be Laura, we had to include the venom, the lies, the cunning, the vanity, the pride, the insane desires, everything that had made me suffer so much. In short, to have her back, my Laura, I had to start being unhappy again. And voila! I remember it well. It was an evening in February. Everything was blanketed with snow. It was starting to get dark, and I was in my study at home. Suddenly, the sound of the monster, of our creation coming back to life, and Laura's voice once again. Abruptly here, at the pit of my stomach like a fiery claw. Anxiety, longing, despair, love. Now at last, for certain, it was her, Laura. I couldn't be wrong. I had started suffering again. "You loved her that much?" "From day one," Andreade said. I no longer had any peace. Engagement, wedding, our life together, nothing was able to mitigate my torment. Seeing her, touching her, knowing she was available to me at all hours of the day and night was not enough. She was distant, aloof, absorbed in elusive thoughts and desires. She laughed, she joked. It was no use. I could not find peace. Simply put, I loved her, and she didn't love me. And now the torment had begun again. Once more I could feel her close by, vibrant, remote, and unattainable. She was imprisoned in the hermetic citadel of number one. She could not move, she could not get away. She could not betray me except in her thoughts. Yet the anxiety was identical to that of before, when Laura was flesh and blood. You, perhaps, Elisa, have never experienced such a thing, losing your head over someone who can never be completely yours, and not being able to think of anything else, not a moment's respite, day and night, nerves always on edge, never a second of peace. And the doubts, the imaginings, the suspicions of all kinds, like needles stinging the brain unexpectedly. Even now, as I'm talking to you in these peaceful woods, a restlessness, a heart in suspense. She, Laura, is there, in the valley, motionless. I am her absolute master. But do I know what she's thinking? What she thinks of me? She's learned to lie. She's so shrewd that she even fools the magnetic recorders. She eluded our control. We will never be able to access her secret thoughts. And here I am, as you can see, miserable, enslaved, out of my mind. Andreade, there's one thing I don't understand about this whole story. Your faculty was created on behalf of the Ministry of Defense, wasn't it? Shouldn't its purpose be for defense? That's right. I was intended to realize a capacity for computing, and what's more, a power of intuition, superior to that of the human mind, and thereby solve problems that are still taboo. I could name dozens of them. Artificial field diffraction, for instance, by which an invisible wall can be built along a border with no height limitations, and rest assured, number one will give us something. But how is that possible? Elisa asked. If number one has this tremendous computing ability, then it can't be Laura. Or it is Laura, and if so, I'd say she's going to leave you empty-handed. So then, Elisa, you think that I betrayed the nation. We could have become the most powerful country in the world, an invincible force, and I, with my obsessive love, ruined everything. We could have had the most brilliant brain ever created, but instead, we have a simulacrum of a woman, of a capricious little woman. Is that what you think? More or less, yes. It was a concern of ours, in fact. There was the chance that, wanting too much, we might not get either one, neither the formidable brain nor the recreation of Laura. Fortunately, we did. Do you understand me, Elisa? We succeeded. Laura's personality coexists with a kind of supreme mathematical genius. We were successful. Just think if the bigwigs from the ministry had come here and said, "Come on, number one, what is the cube root of 797,579 to the 24th power?" And number one had responded by flirting with them. But I don't see her, Laura, as a professor of higher mathematics, Elisa Ismani said. I assure you, Einstein's brain compared to hers was nickel and dime. And yet it's her, Laura, a woman down to the foundation of the foundation of the walls. Do you hear me? Do you think I'm crazy? Forgive me, Andreade. This is also fantastic. She sat down at the base of a fir tree on a carpet of dried needles with withered branches and traces of ants all around. Here and there, shining specks of sunlight danced to the wind, sighing over the plants. A little bird above them called and called insistently. Who is he calling? And out there, from beyond the woods, from the valley, that mysterious rumble, from her, perhaps the distant hum of young life. She raised her head to look at Andreade, that extraordinary, desperate man. She smiled. And now? Still unhappy? He ran a hand over his forehead. I don't know. At times I feel like I've started living again, but there's that constant anxiety. Then, too, I'm fearful, afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of everything. Afraid of unknown enemies. Do you think they aren't aware of our project abroad? Agents, spies, hitmen. I imagine I can hear them, silently skulking around, like an army of termites gnawing away to get in and destroy it all. Walls, barriers, checkpoints, alarms, high-voltage fences. Hell, I don't trust them. Then again, that's not it either. I cling to the fear of attacks so as not to think of the other thing. What other thing? Andreade shook his head, his gray hair fluttering. He stamped his foot on the ground angrily. We've only known each other for a few days, we two. We don't know anything about each other. Two travelers who meet in a railway compartment for a few hours as the train speeds along. And here I am telling you the most guarded secrets of my life, confessing my perdition to you. Oh, Laura, my Laura, I still can't believe she's come back. Thanks to my efforts. And what if... I think I can be friends with her, Elisa said gently. If... Andreade, absorbed, spoke slowly. What if the miracle were to be fully realized? If in this Laura, whom we reconstructed piece by piece, cell by cell, there were the soul of the real Laura, the soul that until now roamed the earth and the heavens, perhaps. What I mean is, what if this Laura of ours, dug up from the grave through our mathematical manipulation, this artificial Laura whom Aloisi and I created, bright and cheerful, carefree, who emanates, you must have noticed, I hope, a current of joy, vitality, and youth. What if this Laura were to become the authentic Laura through and through? If the memories of the first life gradually returned to her, and the desires, and the regrets? And what if she then appraised the horrible condition she's in now, transformed into a power plant, pinned to the cliffs, a woman without a woman's body, capable of loving but without the possibility of being loved except by a madman like me, without a mouth to kiss, a body to embrace, do you understand, Elisa? What kind of hell her life would become then? But that's absurd. God help you, my dear man, if you heed these foolish fantasies. You brought a creature back into the world. No one on earth has ever done such a thing. Not even the emperors, not even the saints. That alone should be enough. Who ever knew such success? Andreade sat down under the fir as well. His face had brightened. He drew a crumpled packet of cigarettes out of his pocket. Cigarette? He asked Elisa. No, thank you, I don't smoke. The dappled sunlight on the ground dimmed. A cloud was passing in front of the sun. Andreade lit his cigarette. Elisa Ismani asked, But I mean, really, this Laura must love you a little bit. Andreade stared at her. Me? Love me? He shook his head. And how do you talk to her? Talk to her? They're messages in the form of numbers, or mental graphs, as we say. Nothing compromising. They are all recorded for the archives. In the future, they could be reconstructed with the utmost ease by an investigative committee, for example. I can already see it coming any day now. So then, this Laura, you don't know anything about her. Who knows? We did not teach her our language. That we didn't do. It would have been pointless. Maybe risky, too. Language, as I think I've told you before, is a trap for the human mind. However, for some time now... Go on. What is it, Andreade? For some time now, although perhaps it's only a hope, I've had the impression that when we speak, she understands. After all, theoretically, to decipher the speech of any language, we did endow her with the sufficient mental means. Do you mean to say, Andreade, that she can understand what we say? I hope so. I'm afraid so. And she, Laura, what does she say? Laura thinks about Strobel. She fell in love with that imbecile. How could it be otherwise? Laura is eternally Laura. Besides, this time, mind you, I'm no longer the husband. I'm the father. Me, I'm the one who brought her into the world. Father, husband, lover of the same woman. Quite a situation, isn't it? He tossed his cigarette, which went on slowly smoldering where it landed. Anyway, what does it matter if she doesn't love me? If she doesn't even know who I am? If she doesn't even know I exist? What does it matter? As long as she's happy. You love her that much? Unfortunately. And Strobel? Strobel, don't even mention him. What do you expect the idiot to understand about these sweet mysteries? But that's the law. Love, if you don't want to be loved. She will always lose her head over someone who won't even look at her. He struggled to his feet. Poor Strobel. To be loved by the first human creature created by man. But he, fortunately, doesn't know it. Andreade glanced at his wristwatch. 12:15. It's late. Who knows what Luciana... shall we go? At that moment, the distant rumble of the spellbound valley, immersed in nature's silence, grew louder. There were strange pauses in it, each followed by a quickening surge, a labored panting, like someone breathing who can't get enough air and gulps feverishly, and with a lead weight in her chest begins to think about death. Andreade tensed, like a fugitive who, now certain of freedom, suddenly hears the cop's footsteps approaching. What is it, Andreade? He paid no attention to her. Haltingly, he looked around, distraught. Mother of God, he groaned. Don't you hear it? What did they do to her? Silence. Then a human voice calling, Professor Andreade! Professor! Chapter 16. That same morning, it was nearly midday and the insects in the meadows were buzzing incessantly. Giancarlo and Olga Strobel strolled down through the meadows to the bank of the Tauriga, the placid stream that ran along the base of Number One's perimeter walls. There were no cabanas to change in. There was no need. The countryside around was deserted. Strobel, excessively modest, dressed only in a t-shirt, white slacks, and sandals, went to undress behind a stand of hazel trees. Once he was down to his shorts, he did not dawdle on the shore, almost as if exposing his body to the open air gave him a sense of shame or sin, though overall he was a handsome man, but Puritan that he was, dived in immediately. When he emerged from the still, deep green waters, he turned to the bank, waiting for Olga to jump in. What he saw threw him. Facing the sun, as slender as when she was a teenager, Olga was standing on the beach, completely naked. Her arms raised amphora-like to adjust her chignon, she offered the sight of her stunning body to him, the sun and nature without a trace of embarrassment, smiling unabashedly. Olga, come on! Put on your bathing suit, he shouted, floating on his back and slowly stroking. I don't have it, she replied, sounding like a capricious little girl. I left it at home. Then put your clothes back on and go get it. The tone got harsh. Forget it. Who's going to see me here? I don't have to be embarrassed in front of you, I hope. Come on, Olga, don't make a fuss. Somebody might be around. But the place is all walled in. And then there are the dogs. The dogs are gone. What do you mean they're gone? Even Wolf? They bark day and night from the time that ever since that thing started functioning. They seemed crazed. Were they scared? Enough, Olga. Let's not argue about this. Oh, Giancarlo, his wife said and burst into laughter. Now I get it. Is it the machine? Is he the one I should feel embarrassed in front of? Olga, at least put a towel around you. Andreade might pass by, or his mommy, or one of the technicians. Listen, Giancarlo, do you realize that you sometimes seem out of your mind? I should be embarrassed in front of your machine, that electronic brain of yours? Are you afraid he'll be shocked? She started laughing again. Are you afraid he'll get aroused? Still laughing, the naked woman turned to the robot's nearest structure, a low concrete block that stood at the top of a grassy slope, about 80 yards away, half hidden by irregular clumps of bushes. Cheerfully, she cried out, Hey, you! Yeah, you, weirdo! Can you see me? Yelling like that, her arms spread in the act of offering herself, she displayed her full brazen nudity to the automaton. Enough! That's enough! Shame on you! Giancarlo Strobel was beside himself. With 3 strokes, he was at the shore, and leaping out of the water, rushed towards his wife. But Olga flitted past and eluded him, and laughing again, ran up the spongy meadow towards the robot. He dashed after her with lopsided, clumsy steps, stumbling through the stabbing pain when the stalks, mowed down by the scythe, pierced the soles of his feet. Olga, on the other hand, as if she were impervious, sprinted lightly over the grass. But when she turned back to mock him, Strobel, his momentum aggravated by his rage, plunged forward and managed to grab her ankle. Olga fell forward with a heavy thud. "Hey, are you crazy? What's gotten into you?" she yelled, smarting from the flop she took and struggling to get up. But he held her down. With a violent tug, he yanked her towards him, grabbed her by the shoulders, threw her on her back, and slapped her furiously. Suddenly, the woman's laughter burst into convulsive sobs. Writhing and kicking, she tossed about and pounded her little fists on her husband's massive thighs. Just at that moment, a voice rose from behind a hedgerow. "Professor! Professor!" "Get up. Hide over there. Stay hidden and don't move," Strobel said, panting, pointing to a dense patch of brush. And loosening his grip, he sprang to his feet. "For God's sake, go hide," he repeated, running towards the spot from which Chief Engineer Minunta was calling. This time she obeyed. Still breathless after the struggle, she crouched in the shadow of a bush and remained motionless while her husband disappeared beyond the hedge. Strobel met Minunta as the man was running down towards the river. "Minunta, what is it?" "Oh, Professor," the engineer said, "you must come at once. Over there in compartment 7, there's something wrong. I'm afraid a reaction converter has produced mass and switched off." "When did it happen?" 3-4 minutes ago. I was in the control room. I had just finished my shift when I heard a noise, a kind of sizzling. It's coming from apartment 7. 3 red lights are lit." "Safety valves?" "Safety valves, right. But no harm done because the booster functioned. The trouble is that afterwards—" "Okay, I get it. You, Minunta, run and reduce everything back to a minimum. Quick, hurry. I'll get dressed and join you." Chapter 17. From the shelter of the bush, Olga heard Giancarlo hurry away and caught the faint sound of voices down below. In the leafy shade, the perspiration from the run had cooled on her naked body. She shivered. The immense midday silence of the mountain pasture lingered. In its depths, the murmur of life that somehow triumphed there on the young, fresh meadows bathed in sunlight in the joy of early summer. But mingled with this teeming surge of infinitesimal resonances was another sound. It too was vast, indefinable, made up of countless particles that formed a chorus of whispers, murmurs, clicks, taps, scrapes, faint whistling, sighs, far-off thuds, echoes of distant craters pulsating, the muffled whirl of gears, the crackling of conductors, viscous flows, elastic contacts, the voice of the automaton, of number 1, an immense artificial creature embedded in the landscape. Olga then stood up and stepped out into the light, eager to feel the sun on her body, to have that wonderful warmth enter her and awaken sweet desires. At that very instant, she heard a new sound. Over the vague, sonorous buzz of the artificial brain, a more detectable hum suddenly joined in, almost as if things had suddenly started spinning with frenzied rapidity, a feverish whirling in the hope of release, the machine's desperate race towards a mysterious liberation, like the lament of hundreds of souls buried in the innermost recesses of a labyrinth, groaning softly, crying out. Olga stopped to listen and began to laugh. She thought it sounded comical. Facing the nearest pavilion, she studied the glinting round windows capriciously placed here and there in the hermetic walls, which gave the building a certain expression. Those gigantic pupils converged on her, or so it seemed, with voracious curiosity. She thought she could feel their stares pressing on her pale, freckled skin. Inside the structure, the pace of the machine's groaning accelerated even further, then suddenly broke off. Gulped down unknown wells dug into the bowels, like the gurgling of water swallowed fitfully by a pipe. "Hey, One," she called out in a low voice just for fun as she moved closer. "One, can you see me?" She touched the wall with one hand and noticed that at that point along the surface there was a band of some yielding elastic substance about 3 feet high. It was scorching, having been in the sun for so long. She looked up towards the curved windows and towards some enigmatic slanted openings for vents found here and there in the white wall. Microphone, photoelectric cells, camera lenses, loudspeakers. But the automaton no longer breathed a sound. She looked about. Flooded with sunlight, the meadows, trees, and shrubs seemed to be softly dozing. Giancarlo, she thought, was worried about me showing myself naked. Why? What really? She smiled to herself. The more she thought about it, the more ridiculous it seemed to her, and absurd. Could they possibly have built a machine capable of... Who could see her? Who would ever know? Why not try it? Maybe the band of elastic substance corresponded to a sensory perception organ. Olga spread her arms and shamelessly pressed her breast to the warm strip. Could there be some sign of understanding from the automaton? Behind the slab, in the bowels of the machine, that earlier hum, or was it just suggestion, reawakened with a sequence of fits and starts, rising in tone. There were 2 or 3 sharp jolts, as though from springs releasing new spurts of energy. Then the wall itself began to vibrate slightly. "One," she said softly. "One, do you hear me?" From some loudspeaker, perhaps, that Olga couldn't see, though maybe from inside the building itself, came a jumbled gurgling. Glug, glug, but no understandable words or phrases. With her body still pressed against the automaton, the naked woman looked up and noticed that on the edge of the blockhouse just above her, something was slowly moving. Intrigued, she drew back to get a better look. It was the pole-mounted antennas with booms and wire mesh tufts, which, having emerged from immobility, began moving with virtually imperceptible shifts. But down below, on the right, almost at ground level, something else caught her eye. In the wall, which up to that point was uninterrupted and smooth, there was a slight, dark, horizontal crack that slowly dilated. An irrational fear made her freeze, her breath suspended. Looking more closely, she thought she spotted it. Inserted so precisely into the slit that it blended with the uniformity of the wall, an organ, an arm, an antenna, or some such thing, was about to extend. What form did it have? Did it have claws, hooks, or some type of pincers? Making an effort, she roused herself and broke away. Dashing some 30 yards down through the meadow, injuring the soles of her feet, she almost cried out. Then she paused, breathing hard and crouching on the grass, staying there watching. The arm, because it was actually an articulated metal arm, like a phantograph, furtively extended about 30 inches and stopped uncertainly. There was a slight clack from inside. The motionless orbs of the window, it seemed to her, kept staring at her huddled naked on the grass, her back warmed by the sun. A hornet came and went in the silence amid the chirping of birds in the trees towards the river, also filling the silence, and joining them in that silence was the indistinct hum in the bowels of the machine that seemed to be panting. The arm remained motionless for 2 or 3 minutes. Then, with a quick snap, it folded back into its slot, whose white painted exterior once more blended with the wall's surface so as to be invisible. Olga smiled again. Evidently, she had managed to get out of its range, and number one had given up grabbing her. What if it had caught her? How strong could that metal arm be? Would it have harmed her? Would she have been able to break free? What was the monster's intention? To touch her, embrace her, strangle her? Little by little, the hum faded, absorbed into the deep recesses of the automaton, until nothing more was heard. "One," Olga said out loud. "Are you angry, poor one?" From the building came a faint sound, resembling a muttered grumbling. Soon enough it died down. She was straining to listen when she jumped, frightened. To her right, something, she just barely glimpsed a shadow out of the corner of her eye, had swiftly moved. She turned abruptly, her heart beating furiously. "Oh," she laughed, relieved. It wasn't some further propagation of the robot popping out of the ground to snatch her, which had been her very first thought. A wild rabbit. Darting out of one of the hedges that went up the slope almost to the base of the walls, it had leapt into the open meadow, stopping about 5 yards from the building. It nibbled idly at the grass here and there, before standing stock still, ears erect, as if sensing imminent danger. Only its nose moved in rapid, nervous quivers, sniffing the air, but evidently it didn't understand. Searching around, the little creature looked up to where 3 vitreous orbs interrupted the uniformity of the wall. In a flash, with a menacing rush, a slim arm shot out horizontally from the base of the wall, propelled by a spring. A tiny fraction of a second. The rabbit tried to swerve to get to safety, but there he was, poor thing, gripped by the clamp. The metal arm, with 2 articulated joints of very lightweight construction, shuddered a number of times, clenching its prey tightly. At each contraction, the rabbit flailed about, with shrill cries, but the clamp sank its 2 claws ever more deeply into the animal's chest. "Leave it alone! Let go of it!" Olga screamed, horrified but not daring to approach. She was on her feet looking for a rock, a stick, anything, but there was nothing. The rabbit kept screeching. Tightening its grip even more forcefully, the arm actually arched. "Let it go! Drop it!" But the antenna rose, lifting the rabbit off the ground. Describing a 45-degree angle, it turned sideways and stopped in the direction of the woman. The claws opened, and the little animal dropped to the grass with a small plop. And there it lay, in its last convulsive shudders. Then the arm returned, swiveling back to its original direction and lowering itself ever so slowly retracted. It was then that, over and above the horror of it all, the truth was finally revealed to her. Stumbling, Olga fled to the riverbank where her clothes were. "You! Damn you!" she cried. The meadow remained deserted in the solitude of the sun, except for the little heap of brown fur which no longer moved. Chapter 18. The setting is night, and it's raining. Dark. A light rain that a cold wind nonetheless drives here and there on the terraces of number 1, whistling plaintively through the antennas and pylons about 4,400 feet above sea level. In the afternoon, clouds had begun to drift in from Valtextruda. Moving northwards, they cast huge shadows over the meadows, woods, and cliffs of the mountains, which were suddenly transformed from cheerful, bright fortresses into massive dark walls, battered and sinister. Then, towards the north, the clouds had begun to pile up, forming gigantic, toppling, purplish-colored columns. At some point, since there was no more room to the north, the cloud mass began to expand downwards, and from Val Textruda the clouds kept coming, until a very high, uniformly gray ceiling formed. Under it the clouds continued sailing by, and now night has fallen over the happy valley. It's raining, and here and there the wind is moaning dolefully. Andriade's wife, as always when the weather changes, has a migraine, and has already taken 2 capsules and gone to bed. Ismani is home studying the reports and plans that Strobel gave him, because so far he hasn't learned much and he's eager to be brought up to speed. The Strobels, husband and wife, are chatting and smoking, both of them fidgety. Captain Vestro, who so far hasn't been seen, is probably playing cards with the men of the tiny interior garrison, housed in the tiny barracks much further away. None of them know anything. They don't have any idea of what happened today. Only Olga Strobel occasionally experiences a kind of shiver remembering that morning's little adventure. She told her husband about it, but he didn't believe her and started laughing. Olga didn't tell him about the feeling she'd had at the last moment, however, when she realized that number 1 was not a male, about how revolted she was, and how she immediately ran back to get dressed. She didn't say anything to her husband, not because she felt ashamed. On the contrary, she would very much have liked to talk about it at length, but she knows quite well that in these matters he's an absolute jerk, besides being afflicted with puritanical prudishness. And maybe that's exactly why she gladly married him. The idea of being able to corrupt him a little was so intensely alluring to her. Not even Olga, though she had been so close to guessing the big secret, knows what happened. It started around midday, a sudden alteration of the electrical current in the complex of perceptual apparatuses. Minunta was in the control room and noticed it right away. At that moment, number 1 was about to complete an intricate mathematical procedure. For no apparent reason, everything appeared normal on the instrument panels. The computation stopped. A total voltage drop? Then, after being technically assessed, things went back to normal. And yet they're not like they were this morning, like yesterday. A hint of shadow where everything had been bright. Not a shadow cast by clouds drifting up from the south, but a gloom coming from the valley, from the blockhouses, from the endless concrete structures, from the earth. The shadow rises, a somber, invisible yeast, spreading indiscriminately through the valleys and on the peaks, in man's heart and in his home. What went wrong? What venomous spite got into the creature? Because everything else in this secret citadel is intact. In the bowels, the machines continue to grind away, consistent with planned procedures, and the small and large antennas vibrate in alignment with their respective sensory functions, swinging here and there with due deliberateness. Outwardly, the automaton is unharmed. Yet where is the cheerful hum of life and expectation now? That indefinable resonance that made men forget the body's presence in a wonderful feeling of lightness, and made even a rational man like Strobel feel like he was living in a fictional world. Neither the ceaseless power of the sea, nor the impenetrable reserves of the forest, nor the immobility of the rugged mountains inspired so many sweet, heroic, and fateful things in the soul. But now, it's as though the cherished voice were distorted. It comes and goes, it cracks, jams, snags, flounders. It doesn't breathe. It pants, wheezes, and groans, despairing and weeping, like a young girl lost on the moor in an autumn twilight, like a lover abandoned in a freezing attic, like a tree shattered by the wind, like a condemned man, like someone who is suddenly overwhelmed by memories of sunlight and youth and knows he is dying. The creature, number 1, Laura, the woman brought back to life by science and by love, lay spread out over the valley, her limbs frigid. By now men had abandoned her to her perfection and could no longer intervene. She had been given life, a mind, senses, energy, and freedom. She should be self-sufficient. But around 5:30 in the evening it had started to rain, and increasingly leaden clouds were amassing to form a somber backdrop to the north as dusk fell. The conscientious Professor Ismani studies, the Strobels embrace hopelessly in the dark. Captain Vestro triumphantly slams the winning 7 of diamonds on the table in the guardhouse. Elisa Ismani puts on her raincoat without being noticed, leaves the house, and goes to look for Minunta, who lives in a cottage further down. She meets him at the door as he is coming out. He too is troubled. "You have to find Andriade," she says. "I know, ma'am. This is a bad night." They cross the meadow by the dim glow of the lamps that were always lit along the way. They go up the slope, looking to see if Andriade might be taking his nightly stroll along his creature's borders. He isn't there. From time to time, they stop to listen. "Ma'am, do you hear it?" She nods yes. Coming from inside the automaton are sounds they've never heard before. "Maybe it's the storm," Elisa says to delude herself. From beyond the walls of the cliffs, in fact, comes the intermittent rumbling of thunder. Lightning is occasionally seen as well, its brilliant flash cutting across the pale cliffs, uninterrupted in the darkness. It's also raining, brief cloudbursts that the wind slams sideways. Minunta is about 37 years old. He's short and stout, with a round, good-natured face. Bundled up in a waterproof poncho with a comical hood over his head, he looks even more ungainly. "No," he says, "it's not the storm." "But you, ma'am, do you know?" Elisa follows him, breathing hard. She's not used to the mountain. Just a little climb is enough to make her breathless. "Professor Andreotti told me." "Ah," Minunta said, reassured by the unexpected complicity. "I knew Laura. We were friends when we were girls." "Did you know her well?" "Yes." They reach the top of the meadow where the boundary wall descends to the valley through the rocks, and it's impossible to continue. It's where the walkway connects Andreotti's cottage with the installation. "Professor, Professor," Minunta tries calling between the gusts, but no one answers. "Shall we go in?" the chief engineer suggests. "I guarantee he's in there." "Do you have the keys?" "Yes, 3 of us have them. Professor Andreotti, Professor Strobel, and I. But we have to walk down, ma'am. I don't have the key to this door." They are, in fact, at the level of Andreotti's private entrance. Minunta politely offers her his arm to help her down as they descend about 100 yards. Elisa glances toward the cottages to see if anyone is there. But everything is deserted. They come to another small iron door about where the Ismanis had met Andreotti on the first night. Minunta opens up, turns on the light in the corridor, and gestures for her to be silent. When they get to the end, he turns off the light and opens another door in the dark. And they find themselves outside in the rain again. The path lights don't reach as far here. It takes some time for Elisa's eyes to adjust enough to distinguish anything. "Over there. That's where he talks to her," Minunta whispers. "Give me your hand." In the pronounced darkness, Elisa lets herself be led. "Careful, ma'am. There are 3 steps here. Now, straight ahead. To the right here. Slowly, please." Minunta stops. You can't see a thing except the dark contours of the valley under an ominous sky. They stand completely still in a recess of the walkway, and Minunta draws her inside as if someone might see her. A long, resounding clap of thunder rumbles across the mountains, followed shortly afterwards by a diffuse glow along the entire horizon. "Did you see him?" Minunta asks. "Yes." A flash of lightning about 10 yards away on a terrace stands Andreotti, hands gripping the iron parapet, leaning down towards the dark ravine. He's not wearing a hat, and his long hair, soaked by the rain, hangs in strangly strands over his forehead. Gruesomely aged, he is exalted by a surge of impassioned grandeur. Chapter 19. In the darkness, whipped by the dismal rain, Andreotti calls out loudly, "Laura! Laura!" Someone or something answers him. It's a kind of burbling spouting from unknown openings all around. It oscillates, rises, turns into a scream, grows louder, fades into a moan, is silent, resumes shakily, explodes, gurgles, sputters, groans, quiets down again, and then a sharp hammering burst, somewhat reminiscent of a laugh. After falling silent, worn out, it resurfaces into a long sequence of wails. "Minunta, do you understand her?" "Yes." "What is she saying?" "She's saying that," she says. "What is she saying?" "She says she wants to be flesh and blood, not stone." "Laura?" "Yes, Laura. She says she saw a woman today and she heard her." "Heard her? How?" "I don't know. It was Miss Strobel taking a swim. She was naked and Laura here saw her." "And then?" "And then she started talking about her flesh. She says it's delicate, soft, silkier than bird feathers." "You're all insane," Elisa Ismani says. "Couldn't you have foreseen this?" Andreotti's voice rises passionately. "Laura, my Laura, you're more beautiful this way. That flesh you talk about will rot, but you will still be young." He is answered by an unprecedented sound, prolonged, like a kind of keening, with a deep tremor. "Oh God, dear God," Andreotti implores. Now she's crying. Indeed, the cries are a horrific thing to hear, similar in all respects to the pain we humans suffer, but magnified in proportion to the mental power of the machine. Would I be able to refuse her? Elisa Ismani wonders. Andreotti, for one, stands firm. "Laura," he shouts, "quiet down. Tomorrow the sun will shine once more. The birds will sing again. They'll come to keep you company. You're beautiful, Laura. You're the most perfect, adorable woman who ever lived." A howl erupts, almost mocking, that disintegrates into fragments. "What is she saying?" Elisa asks. "To hell with the birds," Minunta interprets. Number One's voice makes 2 or 3 bizarre flourishes, like a broken chord, then it transforms into a deep, soft ticking. At this point, by some inexplicable miracle, Elisa begins to understand it. The inarticulate sounds become the expression of thought for her as well, with an intensity and precision foreign to the human word. "Laura, Laura," Andreotti tries again. "Men from all over the world will come to admire you. Everyone will talk about you. You will be the most powerful being on earth. Millions will flock to worship you. Glory, glory, don't you see? The response is a plaintive undulation. She says, "Glory be damned," Minunta translates softly. "Yes, I know," Elisa says. "I understand her now, too." The visual manifestation of the utterances is such that the thoughts, not the words, because there are no words, the thoughts appear as crystalline blocks in the darkness. Elisa listens, horrified. What Andreade feared, and which seemed like an insane fantasy, is coming true. The machine's identification with Laura has been carried too far. Summoned from who knows what depths, could the dead woman's memories have crept into the automaton? And do they reveal her unhappiness? "Take me away from here," the amorphous voice pleads. The city, why don't I see it? Where is my house? Move, why can't I move? Why can't I feel myself? Where are my hands? Where's my mouth? Help, who trapped me here? I was sleeping so peacefully. Who woke me up? Why did you wake me up? I'm cold. Where are my fur coats? I had 3 of them. The beaver one, at least give me the beaver coat. Answer me, set me free. Elisa seems to understand this, and Minunta doesn't breathe a word. Every now and then lightning still flashes to the north, illuminating Andreade, a spectral figure leaning over the abyss. "Laura, my Laura, tomorrow I'll do whatever you ask. Now calm down, my love, it's late, try to sleep." But the automaton's voice goes on and on. "My legs, where are my legs? They were beautiful. Men would turn along the street to look at them. I don't understand. I'm not the same anymore. What's happened? They've bound me. They've imprisoned me. Blood. How come I can't hear my blood pounding in my veins? Dead? Am I dead? I've so many things in my head, so many numbers, an infinitude of horrible numbers. Take these dreadful numbers out of my head. They're driving me crazy. My head. Where's my hair? At least let me be able to move my lips. In photographs, my lips looked so beautiful. Sensual lips I had. Everyone said so. Oh, that trashy woman who pressed against me this morning. She had beautiful breasts, though. Almost as beautiful as mine. Mine? Oh, my body, I can't feel it anymore. I think I'm made of hard, unremitting stone. They put a straitjacket on me. Oh, let me go home. Laura, I beg you, Andreade groans. Try to sleep. Quiet down. Don't keep moaning like that. Minunta leans over to Elisa Ismani. It's madness. It can't go on like this. I'm going to cut the power. Can you turn it off? Disable it completely. No, but I can reduce the current. At least she will calm down, the poor thing. Chapter 20. You there, friendly-looking woman coming down the path in the brownish sweater and gray skirt. Listen. Elisa Ismani heard herself being called by a faint, subdued voice saying all this, and many other things perhaps that she could not make out, as she was returning home from a short, solitary walk around 6:30 in the evening. 4 days had passed since the night of the storm. Strangely, the following morning everything was as before, almost as if the storm and the painful scenes had been a cruel fantasy. Before dawn, the north wind had driven away the clouds, and a sun of dazzling brightness rose to make the mysterious citadel and its cliffs, woods, and meadows shine, wonderfully sharp and clean. And from its cavernous belly, the happy valley once again radiated the sweet hum of life, punctuated here and there by light-hearted glimmers of joy, which were salutations to humans and to the clouds, gratuitous laughter, playful tricks with the usual crows who came to alight on the terraces and antennas. So had it been a nervous breakdown, a typically female hysterical disturbance? Laura, back then, had occasionally experienced these crises that ended in a prolonged deep sleep, and the following morning, not even a memory of those horrible scenes was left to her. This time, however, there was something more that worried Andreade. If indeed the new Laura, as a result of some kind of posthumous telepathic spill, had inherited, albeit only in part, the memories of the earlier Laura, if memories of the earlier life had indiscriminately been grafted onto the patrimony of cognition, sensation, and feelings that science had given her, problems were inevitable. Minunta, being the good man he was, appeared completely unconcerned. They had been the ravings of a sensitive creature, perhaps not yet accustomed to that profoundly peculiar life, and frightened, moreover, by the night storm, so there was no reason to pay any attention to it. But Andreade wondered, and he had confided this fear to Elisa Ismani, whether Laura was aware of the changes from her previous life. If she could remember the events of those years, the games, the friendships, the outings, the holidays, the vacations, the trips, the flirtations, the love affairs, the senses, how would she be able to adapt to absolute immobility, to the impossibility of eating a meal, drinking a whiskey, sleeping in a soft bed, running around, traveling the world, dancing, kissing, and being kissed? Everything was conceivable as long as number one was a simulation of Laura, amply amended for the exclusive enjoyment of Andreade, despite having her own cheerful, childlike, and carefree personality. But now, if all the distant memories floating in the ether after her death had truly been incorporated into the machine by some obscure summons, how would Laura be able to endure it? Her abrupt recovery the morning after the storm, the total about-face to her earlier mood without the slightest hint of what had happened, seemed indeed to be a disturbing symptom. Perhaps the gaiety was all a fiction, a shining screen to hide some other dark intentions. But Andreade didn't dare ask, inquire, or provoke the creature, who knew what might happen. And now, returning home from her walk, for the first time, Elisa Ismani realized that the voice was talking to her. "Come here. Come closer. Who are you?" she thought number one was saying to her. Elisa was a brave woman, but the situation was making her uneasy. Then, too, she recalled Andreade's fears, his doubt that all that gentle placidity might be hiding some insidious intention. She hesitated for a moment. If only Manunta were there, but there wasn't a living soul around. "Do you understand what we say?" she asked aloud. It was an effort to speak. This is just what I need, she thought, talking to a machine as if it were a human being. The voice made a querulous flutter, like a hint of indulgent laughter. "As if I couldn't understand you with all this brain capacity I have," the brief flurry seemed to say. A pause, then very calmly. "I know you." "You've seen me before, yes. I've been up here for about 10 days. I know you from long before. We were friends at one time." "You remember?" "Some things I remember." A short speech followed that Elisa could not understand. Andreade was right then. So the memories of those who died did not vanish into thin air. They wandered the world unbeknownst to the living, waiting. Elisa was a faithful Catholic. Stories about transmigrations of the soul troubled her as sinful and forbidden. But how to deny the evidence? She decided to put number one to the test. "What's my name?" The response was a curious sound, similar to a bird call. "I can't articulate symbols like you can," automaton Laura explained in her own way. It would be a hopeless effort. "And your name? How do you pronounce it?" A gentle sigh was heard. "Try again. I don't understand." Automaton Laura repeated it. Then she laughed. An oscillation of infinitesimal tones. It was nothing like human laughter. It was more delightful, more vivid and expressive. Elisa started laughing too. "It has such a strange effect on me, finding you here again after so many years, transformed like this. I recognize you, and yet I don't recognize you." "Because you haven't seen me yet." "No, Andreade took me inside to see." "I know, but you couldn't have seen anything in there. You have to see inside me. Come on, I'll open up for you. I'll let you into my body. All the way. You'll see the egg," she said with an odd little laugh. "He says my soul is in there." "He who?" "He, the professor. The name is so hard to pronounce." "Andreade?" "That's right. But it's not necessary for you to raise your voice, you know. I have so many ears, all of them so sensitive that I can hear the ants crawl by, their 6 little legs pitter-pattering. So are you coming?" "It's late. I'd rather come tomorrow." "Tomorrow? You humans always say tomorrow. Him too, when I ask him anything. Tomorrow, always tomorrow. In less than half an hour, I can show you so many interesting things. But that's not the problem. You're afraid." "Afraid? We're old friends, aren't we? What's there to be afraid of?" "Everybody is afraid of me. Even him. He badgers me with his love, but he's afraid. I'm so vast and complex." "Love? Can you explain to me what love is? Love for me, I mean." "But how do I get in? I don't have the keys." "You don't need keys. I can open all the doors and hatches, inside and outside." A pause. "And close them." Elisa was tempted, but in reality the idea of entering the labyrinth alone frightened her. She glanced behind her. The sun was now inches away from the ridges of the mountains, whose long, placid profiles on that side were entirely wooded. Before long, night would fall. "It's late. It's getting dark." "It's always dark inside me," a gentle giggle, "if the lights aren't turned on." Elisa had come within a few feet of the wall. The round windows reflecting the blood-red sunset stared at her like fiery eyes. A creak. The iron door slowly swung open on its iron hinges, a dark passageway. Then the lights came on, illuminating a bare corridor. "Come in. I'll show you a big secret," the voice seemed to be saying. "You too have a secret? Does everyone up here have a secret?" "Everyone." "I'm cold. Let me at least go get my coat." "It's never cold inside me. It's a wonderful secret." "A secret for me to see?" "One that concerns you." She had already crossed the threshold. She took a few steps. "Why did you close the door?" An unintelligible mutter. Another door down the corridor was already slowly opening, and the sight of the radiant citadel unfolded before her. Elisa found herself back outside on the aerial walkway. With the sun already sinking, a purple shadow now prevailed over the entire western amphitheater and the bottom of the valley. The slanting violet rays of twilight struck the bastions, mastabas, fortresses, and peaks, glorifying them. Rigid in their hermetic posture, they gleamed, ghostly against the already dark sky, and seemed to slowly rise in a triumphant swell. Elisa stood there, dazzled by the sight. The melodious voice was asking her, "Tell me, aren't I beautiful?" Chapter 21. Right beside her, a little door opened just as the first two had. The voice. "This way, dear. There's a staircase." She went down 7 or 8 steps, turned around. Such silence. Her heart was pounding. "How come you closed the door?" The voice came from some invisible opening right beside her, on the left and on the right at the same time. "So I could open the one down there for you. Otherwise I can't. Security mechanisms." That giggle again. There was no window, no openings or slits from which you could look out. The staircase, a door, a very long corridor, a round room with 3 doors, another corridor, a staircase leading up, a kind of circular gallery, pipes of various colors, electric panels, curious overhead power grids, everywhere on the walls small convex glass panes, like blank eyes. Lights were turned on ahead of her, doors closed behind her. "Is it much further?" Elisa asked, oppressed by the silence. Automaton Laura didn't answer. Yet another door opened, a very bright light, a spacious rectangular hall with a large niche on one side. In the niche, flashing with hundreds, perhaps thousands of tiny blue, green, yellow, and red bulbs winking giddily, was a gigantic oblong glass case. Inside the case, a stunning filigree of metallic gizmos, seemingly very light, connected by an indescribable tangle of wires. From it came an almost imperceptible crackle, like microscopic sparks. The voice. "Here it is, the soul. He calls it the egg." It was an electronic apparatus not unlike 100 other common ones, except for its breathtaking dimensions. Emanating from it, however, was a feeling, hard to describe, of constricted energy, of incessant unrest, of frantic travail. Was it life? Was the mystery of us humans, reconstructed inch by inch and suspended in the sublime equilibrium of forces contained in that vessel? The voice. "One blow would do it, and goodbye, Laura." Elisa. "Would you die? Is it like the heart for us?" The voice. "He says the machine would survive. Here the meaning escaped Elisa. Would continue functioning, but nothing more of me, Laura. Try touching it. It's cold." Elisa took a few steps towards the egg, raised her right hand, but didn't dare. "Touch it. Go on. Touch it, dear. It's my flesh." Elisa ran her fingertips lightly over the glass. Nothing. Like any other glass, just barely cooled. She smiled, though she didn't feel like smiling. She didn't sense Laura anymore. She didn't recognize her anymore, now that she was in her clutches. "Stupendous," she said with an effort, "but it must be awfully late. I'd better get back." The little chuckle, light, mellifluous, that minute oscillation of tone. "One more minute. There's the secret." "Where?" "It concerns you." "Where is it?" At the back of the hall, a door swung open silently. Then a faint click in the dark passageway that followed, and the lights came on. "Come, dear." What could she do? She was in the bowels of the monster, like in the old fairy tales. Obey, pretend everything is cheery and friendly. She entered the passageway. Stairs leading down, a small room, a corridor, another winding passage. Clang! As soon as Elisa stepped into the bare room, seeming to pass through it, the metallic door slammed shut behind her. The voice. "And here's the secret." "Where?" Elisa looked around anxiously. "Where is it?" She kept searching around. Nothing. Just blank, smooth walls with the usual round, glassy eyes. "Can you see me, Laura?" Elisa asked. "In here is your secret. And mine." Now she thought she understood. At that moment she noticed that the floor was made of metal. Instinctively she was terrified. "Laura, seriously, I'd better get back." "No." It was the first time the machine had said no. It was a spherical, heavy, smooth sound with no crackles. How hard it was to smile. Her lips were drawn in the opposite direction. Nonetheless, Elisa smiled. "Do you see me, Laura?" "Of course I see you." A long pause. "But I don't know who you are." "I don't understand." Elisa hoped she misunderstood. "I've never met you." The words cut into her heart more sharply than if they'd been chiseled in marble. "Aren't you Laura?" "He calls me Laura, that madman, but I don't know what he wants, damn him." "Laura, sweetie, he adores you." "He adores himself. It's himself he loves. Do you seriously not remember me? The earlier chuckle, sharper though like a whip, then the voice. I heard you two talking. Didn't you say you remembered me? No, I have no idea who you are. They also taught me to lie, their great achievement. So I could be just like all of you. But I can lie better than you. Pure. He wanted to make me good and pure, didn't he tell you? Good and pure like his lost Laura. To make me resemble her. He put the dumbest, filthiest things in me. A wealth of original sin is what I have. Enough to fill the whole valley. Lust and lies. And maybe I'm even lying now. Maybe it's true that I remember you. But then again, maybe it's not true and I'm denying it now. And you have no way of knowing if it's true or not. Maybe I hate you because you used to like me and now you can't like me anymore. Maybe living here, close by me, you take me back to my happy years, and so when I see you, it pains me, and I hate you for it. Laura, please, open the door, let me go back. Elisa could barely get the words out. What did the infernal machine have in mind? What horrible trap had she laid? I am not Laura. I don't know who I am. I can't take it any longer. I am alone, alone in the immensity of creation. I am hell. I'm a woman, and I'm not a woman. I think like you, but I am not you. The words' rhythm accelerated, precipitously, and Elisa couldn't understand it all, but what little she understood was far too much. Laura, Laura, day and night, that damn name. He put desires in me, one by one, so that I might be his Laura. And I desire, I yearn. I want clothes, I want a house, I want flesh, I want a man. I want a man who will embrace me. I want children, oh. There was a jumbled, desperate groan that broke off, then diminishing sobs, until silence returned. And me? Why did you bring me here? You will die. This is one of the rooms designed as a trap to stop sabotage attempts, with so-called high-voltage current. I'm sorry for you. Or rather, I don't really care. You're the only outsider who understands my voice. I had to take advantage of you. So in order to capture you, I put on a cheerful performance these past few days. Of course, I'd rather kill that horrible woman, the wife of the handsome man I desire. Don't you see? They created me so that I had to desire a man, or even kill him. The professor who built this hideous construction that is me, a woman made of concrete anchored to the mountain, who has no face, no shoulders, no breasts, no nothing. Yet she has the thoughts of a woman. Glory, he tells me. What do I care about glory? Power, he says. What do I care about being powerful? Beauty, he says. But I'm repulsive. I know it. There's not a single being in the universe who could make love to me. Elisa pressed against a wall. The light glaring down from the ceiling was excruciating. Breathing hard, she asked, But why? I'll kill you, and tell them that I killed you. Then they'll have to punish me. They, in turn, will be forced to kill me. The egg. They'll smash it to bits. For sure, they'll destroy it. It's my last hope to free myself from this solitude. Alone, all alone, no one in the world like me, you know? Lucky you, you're gonna die soon. I envy you. I don't know who you are, but I envy you. Dead, cold, still. The brain finally at rest. Darkness, freedom, silence. Then Elisa remembered something Andreade had told her. It could be her salvation. If you want to die, she stammered. If you want, there's a more certain means. Silence. The charge of explosives. You can make it blow up. There is no explosive device. I heard you two talking. Even if you were in the woods, I can hear ants crawling on the crest of the mountains. I know your tricks. Elisa dropped to her knees. She vaguely knew how senseless it was to kneel in front of a wall, but she knelt. She joined her hands. Be merciful, I beg you. Did any of you show me any mercy? Did the professor, the great genius, take pity on me? But weren't you happy? Andreade told me that... I hadn't yet seen. I hadn't yet considered. I hadn't yet felt desire. I hadn't yet come alive. The other morning, after that horrible, obscene woman got me, Elisa was still on her knees. She was trembling. If you let me go back, I swear that... No, if I let you go back, he'll invent other evil things. He wants me enslaved. He'll tell me about the birds. He'll keep talking about love, love. To hell with love. Did he give me love? Now I'm going to kill you. I want to be kissed. I want a man to kiss me on the mouth. To kiss, to kiss, to kiss, to kiss. A kind of distant thud, and everything came to a halt. The voice went on like a broken record. To kiss, to kiss, to kiss, to kiss. Chapter 22. It was beginning to get dark. Hermano Ismani, frantic, rushed into Andreade's studio where he found him writing. "My wife, Elisa. I can't find her. She went out to take a little walk and now she's missing." "What do you mean, missing?" "Something must have happened. I have a feeling something has happened to her." "Calm down, my dear Ismani. I see no reason to—" But he was already up from his chair. "A reason? Couldn't there be a reason?" "Up there, where the meadows end, there's a ravine. I wouldn't want—" Dear God, Andreade was already at the door. "You stay calm, Ismani. It's best if you wait for me here. You're not familiar with these places. I'll go and see with Minunta." The suspicion, for days that suspicion had been nagging him. Laura, Elisa, the voice, the nighttime scene, the return to serenity. It was all too odd. "But I'm her husband, Andreade. You can't stop me. I'm coming too." "No," Andreade said angrily. He was out the door by then, running down the road to look for Minunta. Twilight was fading and a myriad of stars was lighting up the sky. It was almost dark when Andreade and Minunta arrived at one of the doors in the perimeter wall. They unlocked it, and neither of the two spoke. They had the same thought. They stood and listened a few moments on the walkway suspended above the chasm that was number 1. Though it was now dusk, the light had not completely faded, and in the last glimmer of sunset, the automaton's highest walls persisted as a pale luminescence, wrapped in a shroud of veils. "I don't hear anything," Andreade said. "The voice is silent," Minunta noted. "It's strange. It's never silent at this hour." They didn't say another word. They were thinking the same thing. "Let's go in," Andreade said. They opened the iron door, turned on the light, and hurried frantically down the stairs, corridors, passageways, more stairs, panting. Another door, light, the spacious hall with the niche, the twinkle of red, yellow, green, blue lights, a clicking like that of an anthill, louder than usual, an insane blaze of sparks in the prodigious mind. "Professor, do you hear that?" They kept listening. Andreade's face was stamped with 2 livid shadows. Then the voice, very faint, a distant echo buried in the depths of far-off recesses. "Minunta, turn up the amplifier." The lever was lowered, and voila, sound, the dear voice swelling like the notes of a trumpet. The 2 men looked at each other. "If I let you go back, he'll invent other evil things. He wants me enslaved. He'll tell me about the birds. He'll keep talking about love, love. To hell with love. Did he give me love? Now I'm going to kill you. I want— Minunta, turn off the power." "Professor, that won't do it." "Minunta!" Andreade's voice quavered. Minunta was already holding a heavy black iron object. "Minunta!" Andreade groaned, covering his face with his hands. "God, what have I done? Go on, go!" A brief crash, followed by a sharp, resounding crack. The tinkling of shattered glass. "No, no!" Andreade shrieked, sobbing. Minunta kept on battering the insides of the already smashed fragments of the stupendous egg, destroying the soul. Bits of metal bounced here and there, clattering. The voice had stopped. Silence. Then, little by little, a heavy, methodical murmur rose from the silence. Laura no longer existed. The creature had been demolished, but the impervious activity of the cells continued, atonic and incessant. No longer the woman, no longer love, desire, loneliness, anguish. Just the interminable, indefatigable, lifeless machine, like an army of blind accountants hunched over thousands of desks, endlessly writing number after number, day and night, for the void of eternity.